When the coldest duke in England met the only woman who dared defy him, their arranged marriage became a battlefield, and neither expected to fall in love on it. Welcome to a story of defiance, danger, and a love forged in shadows. If you've ever felt powerless, traded like currency, or underestimated by those who should have seen your strength, this story is for you. Stay until the end to witness how a woman sold to settle debts became the most feared strategist in the realm. And if you're watching from London, New York, Paris, or anywhere in between, drop your city in the comments and hit that like button. Let's begin. The carriage wheels churned through mud and rain, each rotation pulling Eliza Thornfield further from the only life she'd ever known. Inside the confined space, she sat rigid against the worn velvet seat, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. The storm outside matched the tempest in her chest, fury, grief, and a bitter acceptance all warring for dominance. She was 22 years old, unmarried by choice until 3 weeks ago, and now being delivered like a parcel to a man she'd never met. Her father hadn't even had the courage to tell her himself. Instead, he'd sent his solicitor, a thin, nervous man named Mr. Pemberton, who'd sat in their drawing room wringing his hands while he explained that Lord Richard Thornfield had accumulated debts so catastrophic that bankruptcy was imminent. The estates would be seized, the family name ruined. Her younger sisters would have no prospects, no futures, unless Eliza agreed to marry Duke Adrian Blackthorne. The Duke has offered a most generous settlement, Pemberton had said, not meeting her eyes. Enough to clear all debts and provide dowries for your sisters. He asks only for your hand in marriage. He's buying me, Eliza had replied flatly. Pemberton had flinched. I wouldn't phrase it quite so. Then how would you phrase it? She'd stood, her afternoon tea growing cold on the table beside her. My father is selling me to a stranger to cover his gambling debts. What other words exist for such a transaction? The solicitor had stammered something about duty and family honor, but Eliza had already left the room. Now, 3 weeks later, she was keeping her end of a bargain she'd never agreed to make. The carriage hit a rut in the road, jolting her against the side panel. Through the rain-streaked window, she caught glimpses of the Blackthorne estate as they approached. Vast stretches of moorland giving way to manicured gardens, then the manor house itself rising from the mist like something from a Gothic novel. Dark stone, towering spires, windows that reflected the storm clouds like dead eyes. It looked exactly like the sort of place a monster would live. And Duke Adrian Blackthorne was, by all accounts, precisely that. The rumors about him were legendary throughout English society. The Duke who'd inherited his title at 16 and transformed the Blackthorne holdings into an empire within a decade. The man who'd refused every marriage prospect presented to him for years, until whispers began that he was incapable of human affection. Cold as winter stone, they said. Ruthless in business. Merciless to his enemies. Some claimed he'd driven 3 rivals to financial ruin through calculated manipulation. Others whispered that he'd once fought a duel at dawn and walked away without a scratch while his opponent bled out in the grass. The stories contradicted each other in details, but aligned on one essential truth. Adrian Blackthorne was a man to be feared, and Eliza was being delivered to him like a sacrificial lamb. The carriage rolled to a stop before the main entrance. Through the window, Eliza could see servants emerging with umbrellas, their faces professionally neutral. A footman opened her door, and the sound of rain intensified, a torrential downpour that immediately soaked the hem of her traveling dress despite the umbrella hastily raised above her head. "This way, Miss Thornfield," the footman said, his voice barely audible over the storm. She followed him up the stone steps, through massive oak doors that closed behind her with a sound like a prison gate slamming shut. The entrance hall was cavernous, marble floors, soaring ceilings, and the kind of oppressive silence that came from too much space and too few people to fill it. A severe-looking woman in black approached, her keys jangling at her waist. "Miss Thornfield, I am Mrs. Hawthorne, the housekeeper. His Grace is waiting for you in his study, if you'll follow me." Not even time to dry off, Eliza thought bitterly. Not even the courtesy of being shown to a room to compose herself. She was being summoned like a servant. Mrs. Hawthorne led her through a maze of corridors, their footsteps echoing off walls lined with portraits of stern-faced Blackthorne ancestors. The house felt like a mausoleum, beautiful in a cold, lifeless way. Everything perfectly arranged and utterly devoid of warmth. Finally, they stopped before a set of double doors. Mrs. Hawthorne knocked twice, then opened one door without waiting for a response. "Miss Thornfield, Your Grace." The housekeeper stepped aside, and Eliza found herself looking into a study that matched the rest of the house. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, heavy furniture that seemed designed to intimidate. Rain lashed the tall windows, and a fire burned in the hearth, but even that seemed to give off more shadow than light. And behind an enormous desk sat the Duke. Adrian Blackthorne didn't rise when she entered, didn't smile, barely acknowledged her presence beyond a slight lift of his eyes from whatever document he'd been reviewing. Eliza felt a flash of fury at the calculated rudeness of it, making her stand there dripping rainwater onto his Persian rug while he finished his business. She used the moment to study him. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with the kind of face that would have been handsome if it weren't so completely devoid of warmth. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark hair perfectly groomed despite the late hour. He wore evening clothes with the kind of casual elegance that suggested wealth so old it didn't need to be displayed, but it was his eyes that held her attention. Pale gray, like winter ice, and just as cold. This was the man who'd purchased her future. Finally, Adrian set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, regarding her with the expression one might use to evaluate livestock at market. "Miss Thornfield." His voice was deep, controlled, utterly without inflection. "I trust your journey was acceptable." The casual politeness of it, as if she'd come for tea rather than to be inspected by her future husband, made something inside Eliza snap. "Let's not pretend this is a social call, Your Grace." One dark eyebrow lifted slightly. "Indeed?" "You've bought me." The words came out sharp, clear, each one deliberate. "My father sold me to clear his debts, and you purchased a bride the way other men purchase horses or hounds. So please, spare us both the charade of polite conversation." Silence fell between them, broken only by the sound of rain against glass. Eliza waited for the explosion, for rage, for offense, for the Duke to have her thrown out for her insolence. Instead, something shifted in those cold gray eyes. Not warmth exactly, but interest. "You're angry," Adrian observed, his tone unchanged. "I am furious." "Good." He stood then, and Eliza realized he was tall, easily over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that seemed to fill the room. He moved around the desk with predatory grace, stopping a few feet away from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Anger is honest. Anger has spine." "Is that why you chose me?" Eliza demanded. "Because you thought I'd be angry enough to be interesting?" "I chose you," Adrian said slowly, "because you were available, appropriately connected, and your father's desperation made the transaction simple. I needed a wife. You needed rescue from destitution. The arrangement was mutually beneficial." "Mutually beneficial," Eliza laughed, the sound bitter. "You speak as if I had any choice in the matter." "You didn't." The bluntness of it was almost refreshing. "Neither did I, in the ways that matter. We both have roles to play, Miss Thornfield. The question is whether we play them as adversaries or as something approaching allies." "Allies," Eliza repeated the word like it was foreign. "You think we can be allies when you've stripped away every shred of my autonomy?" "I think," Adrian said, his eyes never leaving hers, "that you have a choice now. Right here, in this moment. You can spend the rest of your life resenting me for circumstances neither of us engineered, or you can decide what kind of Duchess you want to be." "I don't want to be any kind of Duchess at all." "And yet here you are." He gestured around the study. "Here we both are. So what will you do about it?" The question hung in the air between them. Outside, thunder rumbled across the moors. Eliza felt the weight of her situation pressing down on her, the inevitability of it, the absolute lack of escape. Her father had signed the contracts, the settlement had been paid. The wedding was scheduled for 3 days hence. But something in Adrian's words, and the way he watched her, not like a possession but like a problem to be solved, made her pause. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "The truth, not the polite fiction." Adrian's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. I want you to survive. Survive? This marriage, this life, the expectations that will be placed upon you as Duchess of Blackthorne. He moved back to his desk, leaning against it with casual confidence. Most women in your position would accept their fate quietly. Play the decorative wife, smile at parties, manage the household staff, produce an heir, and fade into comfortable irrelevance. And you don't want that. I don't need that, Adrian corrected. I need a duchess who won't shatter under pressure, who won't flinch when society's vultures circle, who has enough steel in her spine to stand beside me rather than behind me. Why? Eliza demanded. What pressure could possibly— Because everything you've heard about me is true, Adrian interrupted, his voice dropping to something almost dangerous. I am ruthless. I am cold. I have enemies who would destroy anyone close to me just to watch me suffer. And I am about to make you the most visible target in England by marrying you. Eliza's breath caught. Then why marry at all? Because I need the appearance of normalcy, stability. The crown has certain expectations for men in my position. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And because someone in my world needs protection more than she realizes. Who? You. The word fell between them like a stone into still water. Eliza stared at him, trying to parse meaning from his expression, but Adrian's face had returned to its mask of cold control. I don't understand, she said finally. You will. Adrian pushed away from the desk, moving toward the door. Mrs. Hawthorne will show you to your rooms. We'll dine at 8. The wedding will take place Thursday morning, as scheduled. You have 3 days to decide who you want to be when you stand beside me at that altar. He opened the door, clearly dismissing her, but Eliza didn't move. And if I refuse? She asked quietly. If I get back in that carriage right now and leave? Adrian looked at her over his shoulder, and for just a moment something flickered in those ice-gray eyes. Regret, perhaps, or warning. Then your father loses everything, your sisters are ruined, and you spend the rest of your life wondering if you were brave enough to face the monster, or if you ran because it was easier. That's not fair. No, Adrian agreed. It isn't. But it's the truth. He left then, his footsteps fading down the corridor. Eliza stood alone in the study, rainwater still dripping from her hem, her heart pounding against her ribs. Mrs. Hawthorne appeared in the doorway. Miss Thornfield, shall I show you to your rooms? Eliza took a breath, then another. Through the window she could see the storm beginning to break, cracks of light appearing between the clouds, like the world was splitting open. Yes, she said finally. Please. The rooms Mrs. Hawthorne led her to were beautiful in the same cold way as the rest of the house. Elegant furnishings, pristine linens, everything perfectly appointed and utterly impersonal. A suite fit for a duchess, the housekeeper explained. The bedroom, the dressing room, a private sitting room. Doors that connected to the Duke's chambers but were, Mrs. Hawthorne assured her with professional discretion, always locked unless otherwise requested. A prison with silk curtains and gilded mirrors. Eliza's trunks had already been brought up and unpacked by maids she'd never met. Her few personal belongings looked pathetic scattered among the grand furniture. A handful of books, some watercolors she'd painted, a music box her mother had given her before she died. Evidence of a life that no longer existed. She dismissed the maids and stood at the window, looking out over the grounds. The storm had passed, leaving everything washed clean and glistening. In the distance, she could see the edge of the moorland stretching toward the horizon. Wild, untamed country that seemed to go on forever. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, Eliza called, expecting a servant. Instead, a young woman entered, perhaps 18 or 19, with honey-colored hair and warm brown eyes that held a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. She wore a day dress of quality fabric but simple cut, and she moved with the kind of easy confidence that suggested she belonged here. Miss Thornfield, the young woman said, offering a small curtsy that seemed more polite formality than deference. I'm Lady Caroline Ashworth, Adrian's cousin. I wanted to welcome you before dinner. Lady Caroline? Eliza managed a nod. Forgive me, I wasn't told to expect— Adrian wouldn't have mentioned me, Caroline interrupted with a wry smile. He forgets that normal people appreciate social niceties like introductions. May I sit? She gestured to the chairs by the fireplace, and Eliza found herself nodding. Caroline settled into one chair with familiar ease, suggesting she'd spent considerable time in these rooms. "You're living here," Eliza observed. "My parents died when I was 15, Caroline explained. "Adrian became my guardian. He's been letting me live here while I navigate the marriage market, though I think he's hoping I'll give up and become a spinster so he doesn't have to vet my suitors." Despite everything, Eliza felt a smile tug at her lips. He seems the protective type. In his way, Caroline's expression grew more serious. He's also terrifying and impossible and completely closed off emotionally, but he's not cruel. Whatever you've heard, whatever you think he is, he's not cruel. "He bought me," Eliza said flatly. "Paid my father's debts in exchange for a wife he'd never met. How is that not cruel?" Caroline was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Adrian does everything for a reason. Not always a good reason, mind you, and certainly not always a reason he'll explain, but nothing he does is casual or careless. That doesn't make it better." "No," Caroline agreed. "It doesn't, but it might make it survivable." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but I also know my cousin, and if he chose you specifically, if he went through the trouble of arranging this marriage, then there's something about you he believes is important. Or convenient. Adrian doesn't do convenient. He does calculated." Caroline stood, smoothing her skirts. "Dinner is in an hour. I'll send Mary up to help you dress. And Miss Thornfield? Whatever Adrian told you about surviving this marriage, he meant it. This house, this life, it's not what it appears to be." "What do you mean?" But Caroline was already at the door, her hand on the handle. She glanced back with an expression Eliza couldn't quite read, part warning, part encouragement. "You'll see," she said, "sooner than you think." Then she was gone, leaving Eliza alone with more questions than answers. Dinner was a strange, formal affair. The dining room could have seated 40, but only 3 places were set. Adrian at the head of the table, Caroline to his right, and Eliza to his left. An army of servants moved silently through the room, serving courses with practiced efficiency, while the 3 of them navigated conversation like diplomats at a peace treaty. Caroline carried most of the discussion, asking Eliza about her interests, her education, her family, safe topics that skirted around the elephant in the room, the fact that Eliza was here under duress to marry a man who treated her acquisition as casually as purchasing new horses for his stable. Adrian said little, but Eliza could feel his attention on her throughout the meal. Watching, evaluating, trying to determine, perhaps, if he'd made a sound investment. The thought made her stomach turn. "Miss Thornfield paints, Caroline was saying, her voice bright with forced enthusiasm. "Watercolors," she told me. "Perhaps you could show Adrian your portfolio after dinner?" "I'm sure His Grace has more important matters to attend to," Eliza replied coolly. "Actually," Adrian said, speaking for the first time in 20 minutes, "I would be interested to see your work." Both women looked at him in surprise. He met Eliza's gaze steadily, his expression unreadable. "You paint," he continued. "What subjects?" Eliza set down her fork carefully. "Landscapes, mostly. The countryside near our estate, gardens, places where things grow. Not portraits? I find landscapes more honest. People lie with their faces. Land simply is what it is." Something flickered in Adrian's eyes, that same spark of interest she'd seen in the study. An interesting philosophy. "I paint what I see," Eliza said, "without pretense or performance. Perhaps that makes me unusual in your world." "Perhaps it makes you essential," Adrian replied quietly. The words hung in the air, weighted with meaning Eliza couldn't quite grasp. Caroline looked between them, her expression knowing, before standing with deliberate cheer. "I believe I'll retire early," she announced, though it was barely past 9. "All this excitement has quite worn me out. Miss Thornfield, Adrian, good night." She swept from the room before either of them could protest, leaving Eliza alone with the Duke. Adrian stood, moving to the sideboard where decanters of liquor gleamed in the candlelight. "Brandy?" "I don't drink spirits." "Wine, then?" He poured 2 glasses without waiting for her answer, bringing one to her before taking the seat Caroline had vacated, closer to Eliza now, near enough that she could see the fine details of his face. A small scar above his left eyebrow, the precise way his cravat was tied, the controlled stillness with which he held himself, as if relaxation were a foreign concept. "You're studying me," he observed. "You've been studying me all evening." "Guilty." Adrian took a sip of his brandy. "I'm trying to determine if I've made a terrible mistake." "And?" Eliza challenged. "Have you?" "Too soon to tell." He set down his glass, turning to face her fully. "Tell me, Miss Thornfield, what do you want from this marriage?" The directness of it caught her off guard. "I thought that was already decided. You want a decorative duchess? I need my family saved from ruin." "No." Adrian's interruption was sharp. "I asked what you want, not what circumstances demand, not what duty requires. What does Eliza Thornfield want?" No one had asked her that. Not her father, not the solicitor, not even Caroline with her kind sympathy. They'd all assumed, all decided, all moved forward as if Eliza's desires were irrelevant to the transaction. "I want my life back," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to not be property. I want to make my own choices." "What if I told you," Adrian said slowly, "that becoming my Duchess might be the only way to achieve exactly that?" "I'd say you're either lying or delusional. Or informed." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "The world sees the Duchess of Blackthorne as an ornament, yes, a beautiful accessory to a powerful man, but they underestimate what that position actually means. The access it provides, the influence it wields, the freedom it can purchase." "Freedom?" Eliza laughed bitterly. "I'm being forced into marriage. Where's the freedom in that?" "The freedom," Adrian said, his gray eyes intense, "of being too important to ignore, too visible to silence, too powerful to dismiss. You'll have wealth beyond anything your father squandered, social position that opens every door in England, and the protection of a name that makes even the crown tread carefully." Protection from what? Adrian's jaw tightened. For a moment, Eliza thought he wouldn't answer. Then, from men who would use you as leverage against your family, from creditors who would see you married to whatever aging lord offered the highest bid, from a world that views unmarried women of your station as resources to be exploited. He paused. "Your father's debts didn't just threaten bankruptcy, Miss Thornfield. They attracted the attention of people far more dangerous than bill collectors." A chill ran down Eliza's spine. "What people?" "The kind who make their fortunes from other men's desperation, who would have offered to clear your father's debts in exchange for certain considerations that would have left you in a significantly worse position than you're in now." Eliza's hands tightened on her wine glass. "You're saying you saved me." "I'm saying I intervened before someone else could. Whether that constitutes salvation or simply a different form of cage, that's for you to determine." Thunder rumbled in the distance, another storm rolling in across the moors. Eliza stared at Adrian, trying to reconcile the cold, calculating man before her with the suggestion of protection in his words. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why intervene at all if you're as ruthless as they say?" Adrian stood, moving back to the window. The rain had started again, streaking the glass like tears. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. "Because I know what it's like to be traded like currency, to have your future decided by men who view you as a means to an end." He glanced back at her, and for just a moment the mask slipped. Behind the ice she saw something raw, something human. "I can't give you back the life you lost, Miss Thornfield, but I can give you the tools to build a new one, on your own terms, as your wife, as the Duchess of Blackthorne, which is not the same thing." Eliza rose, setting down her wineglass with deliberate care. She moved to stand beside him at the window, looking out at the storm-swept grounds. "I don't trust you," she said. "Good. You shouldn't. But I also don't have any other options." "No," Adrian agreed. "You don't." They stood there in silence, two strangers bound by circumstance, watching the rain transform the world beyond the glass. Finally, Eliza spoke. "If I do this, if I marry you and become your Duchess, and play whatever role you need me to play, I want one thing in return. Name it. The truth. Always. I won't be kept in the dark. I won't be managed or manipulated or lied to for my own protection. If there's danger, I want to know. If there are enemies, I want their names. If this marriage is anything other than what it appears to be, I deserve to know what I'm actually stepping into. Adrian turned to look at her, and something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. Agreed, he said simply. But understand, the truth may be more dangerous than ignorance. I'll take that risk. Will you? Adrian moved closer, close enough that Eliza could see the silver threads in his gray eyes. The truth is, Miss Thornfield, that I'm not just a duke. I work for the crown in capacities that don't officially exist. I have enemies who would destroy anyone I care about simply to hurt me. And marrying you makes you a target whether you want to be one or not. Eliza's breath caught. You're a spy. I'm a strategist, an intelligence operative, a problem solver for matters too delicate for official channels. His voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. And yes, when necessary, a spy. And you're telling me this because you demanded the truth, and because you need to understand what you're agreeing to. Adrian's hand came up, not quite touching her face, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of it. If you marry me, Eliza, you don't get the safety of ignorance. You get the danger of knowledge. You get enemies in the shadows and threats you'll never see coming. You get a husband who may disappear for weeks on crown business and return with injuries he can't explain. But I get the truth. You get the truth. Eliza held his gaze, her heart pounding. This was insane. This was beyond anything she'd imagined when that carriage had brought her here. She should run, should refuse, should find some way, any way, to escape this madness. But even as the thought formed, she knew she wouldn't. Because Adrian was right about one thing. She did have a choice. Not about the marriage, that die was cast, but about who she would be within it. Then I want to know everything, she said firmly. Starting now. Who are these enemies? What threats am I walking into? And why did you really choose me? Adrian's mouth curved in something that might have been a smile on a warmer man. Now you're asking the right questions. He moved back to the table, pouring himself another brandy. The threats are varied and evolving. Men who oppose the crown's policies and see me as an obstacle. Foreign agents who would like to know what I know. Rivals who believe removing me would advance their own ambitions. Some have names, some are shadows. And me? How do I factor into their calculations? Your leverage, Adrian said bluntly. The moment we marry, you become my visible weakness. Something they can threaten. Something they can take to force my hand or distract me from larger objectives. Then why marry at all? Eliza demanded. If it puts me in danger, because you were already in danger. The words came out sharp, cutting. Adrian set down his glass hard enough that liquor sloshed over the rim. Your father's debts had been purchased by a man named Lord Ashford. Do you know that name? Eliza shook her head. Consider yourself fortunate. Ashford makes his wealth through human misery. Brothels, opium dens, blackmail, worse. He'd acquired your father's debt specifically because he'd learned you existed. A beautiful, educated young woman from a respectable family, desperate enough to accept any lifeline. Horror crawled up Eliza's spine. He was going to use you however he saw fit, yes. And your father was too deep in denial and brandy to even realize what he'd enabled. Adrian's voice was controlled again, but fury simmered beneath it. When my agents informed me of the situation, I had a choice. Ignore it or intervene. I chose intervention. By buying me yourself, by offering your father a settlement he couldn't refuse, and making sure Ashford understood that you were under my protection, untouchable. Adrian moved closer again, his eyes intense. Do you understand, Eliza? I didn't save you from danger. I made you too dangerous to touch. The implications settled over her like a heavy cloak. So this marriage is strategic, yes, but it's also real. The moment you become the Duchess of Blackthorne, you have power, and my enemies won't risk moving against you without calculating the cost. Unless they decide the cost is worth it. Unless that, Adrian agreed grimly, which is why I need to know you can survive. Why I need to know you won't break under pressure or collapse when the truth gets ugly. Eliza moved to the window again, processing everything he'd told her. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the grounds in stark white relief. For just a moment, she saw the estate as it really was, beautiful but isolated, protected but exposed, a fortress that was also a target. "If I agree to this," she said slowly, "I want training." Adrian's reflection appeared in the glass beside her. "Training? If I'm going to be a target, I won't be helpless. Teach me what I need to know. How to recognize threats. How to protect myself. How to navigate this world you're pulling me into." She turned to face him directly. "I won't be your decorative weakness, Adrian. If I'm going to wear the target, I'm going to be ready for it." For the first time since she'd met him, Adrian Blackthorne smiled. It was small, barely visible, but it transformed his face, made him look younger, more human, almost approachable. "Now you're thinking like a duchess," he said. "I'm thinking like someone who refuses to be a victim." "Even better." Adrian extended his hand. 3 days until the wedding. 3 days to decide if you can truly commit to this madness. And then, Eliza Thornfield, then we see if we can survive each other. Eliza looked at his outstretched hand. This was the moment. The choice that would determine everything that followed. She thought of her father's weakness, her sister's uncertain futures, the life she'd lost and couldn't reclaim. Then she thought of Adrian's words, the freedom of being too important to ignore, too visible to silence, too powerful to dismiss. She took his hand. 3 days, she agreed, and then we face whatever comes together. Adrian's grip was firm, controlled, the handshake of equals rather than master and possession. "Together," he echoed. Outside, the storm raged on, but Eliza Thornfield stood in the Duke of Shadow's manor and felt, for the first time since that solicitor had walked into her drawing room, something that might have been hope. Or maybe just the stubborn refusal to surrender without a fight. Either way, it would have to be enough. Months. The 3 days before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation that felt both rushed and interminable. Eliza met with the vicar, approved a menu she didn't care about, and stood for endless fittings while seamstresses pinned and adjusted a wedding gown she'd never chosen. But beneath the surface of traditional wedding preparation, something else was happening. Adrian kept his word. On the second day, he brought her to his study, not the public one where they'd first met, but a private office hidden behind a false bookshelf. Here, maps covered the walls, reports stacked on tables, a network of intelligence operations laid bare in coded documents and strategic assessments. "This is what I actually do," Adrian said, watching her reaction. "The dukedom is real, but it's also cover. My real work is protecting England from threats most citizens will never know existed." Eliza moved through the room, taking it all in. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since I was 18. My father was involved before me. It's a family tradition, you might say. The crown has always needed men willing to operate in the shadows." "And women?" Eliza challenged. "Or is that too dangerous for delicate female constitutions?" Adrian's mouth quirked. "Actually, some of our most effective operatives are women. Society underestimates them, makes them invisible, very useful in intelligence work." "Is that why you're telling me this? You want me to spy for you?" "I'm telling you this because you demanded the truth. What you do with it is your choice." He pulled out a file, handing it to her. "But since you asked about training, this is Lord Ashford, the man who intended to acquire you." Eliza opened the file. Inside were reports, ledgers, witness statements, a documentation of human trafficking, blackmail, and worse. Her stomach turned. "He's still operating," she observed, her voice tight. "For now. Building a case takes time. Evidence. Witnesses willing to testify, which is difficult when they're terrified." Adrian's jaw tightened. "But he will fall. I promise you that." "How?" "Carefully, strategically." He met her eyes. "And perhaps with help from someone he'll never suspect. A duchess moving through society, hearing whispers he doesn't know are being reported back." Eliza closed the file. "You do want me to spy. I want you to survive. If that means teaching you how to navigate the same world I navigate, how to see threats, gather information, protect yourself, then yes, I suppose I do." Adrian moved closer. But I won't force you. This has to be your choice, Eliza, just like the marriage has to be your choice to embrace rather than endure. It's not much of a choice when the alternative is ruin. No, Adrian agreed, but it's the choice we have. So what will you do with it? Eliza looked at the maps on the walls, the intelligence reports, the evidence of a shadow war being fought while society danced and dined in blissful ignorance. She thought about Ashford and men like him who preyed on the desperate and discarded. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 days ago, angry, powerless, traded like property. And she thought about the woman she might become, if she was brave enough to seize it. "Teach me," she said finally, "everything. I want to know how your world works. I want to learn what you know. And then, Adrian prompted, then we'll see if the Duchess of Blackthorne can be more than just a pretty target." Adrian's smile was sharp, pleased. "I was hoping you'd say that." They spent the rest of the day in that hidden study. Adrian teaching, Eliza learning, the basics of observation, of reading people, of recognizing when something was wrong. It was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. But it was also the first time since arriving at Blackthorne Manor that Eliza felt like she had agency, like she was building something rather than simply surviving. That night, she dined with Adrian and Caroline again. But this time, when Adrian asked her thoughts on the upcoming wedding, Eliza met his eyes steadily. "I think," she said carefully, aware of Caroline listening, "that it will be the beginning of something unexpected." "Unexpected how?" Caroline asked, curious. Eliza glanced at Adrian. He raised one eyebrow slightly, a question in his expression. "Your choice," he seemed to be saying, "your truth to tell or conceal." "I think," Eliza continued, "that I've spent my whole life being what others expected. Perhaps it's time to discover who I actually am." Caroline beamed. "I knew I liked you." And across the table, Adrian Blackthorne lifted his wineglass in a small private toast. To new beginnings, to dangerous choices, to the bride who refused to bow, and the Duke who was beginning to realize he might have finally met his match. The wedding was tomorrow, and nothing would ever be the same. The morning of the wedding dawned cold and clear, frost coating the windows of Eliza's chambers like lace. She woke before dawn, unable to sleep, and found herself standing at the window watching the sun rise over the moors. In a few hours she would become the Duchess of Blackthorne, the wife of a man she barely knew, a player in a game whose rules she was only beginning to understand. Mary, the young maid Caroline had assigned to her, arrived at 6 to begin preparations. The girl was nervous, chattering about the wedding breakfast and how beautiful the chapel looked with winter roses, clearly trying to fill the silence with normalcy. Eliza let her talk, grateful for the distraction as layers of silk and lace were arranged around her. The wedding gown was exquisite, ivory silk with delicate beading that caught the light like ice crystals. It fit perfectly, thanks to the endless fittings, and when Eliza finally looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like a duchess, like someone important and untouchable, like a beautiful lie. "You're stunning, miss," Mary breathed, adjusting the veil. "His Grace won't be able to take his eyes off you." Eliza doubted Adrian would notice. He'd made it clear this marriage was strategic, not romantic. She was a chess piece being moved into position, nothing more. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Caroline entered, already dressed for the ceremony in deep blue velvet, her expression bright with forced cheer. "The carriage is ready," she announced. "Are you—" She stopped, really looking at Eliza, and her smile softened into something more genuine. "You look terrified." "I feel terrified." "Good. That means you're not delusional." Caroline crossed to her, taking both her hands. "Listen to me. I know Adrian can be impossible. I know this whole situation is mad, but I've lived with him for 7 years, and I promise you, he keeps his word. Whatever he's promised you, he'll deliver." "He promised me the truth," Eliza said quietly. "And danger." "Then you'll get both." Caroline squeezed her hands once, firmly. "But you'll also get protection, power, and a husband who, though he'd rather die than admit it, actually has a heart buried under all that ice. You just have to be patient enough to find it." "I don't want his heart," Eliza protested. I want survival, agency, freedom. I know. Caroline's smile turned knowing. But sometimes, in the process of getting those things, you might find something you didn't expect. Just keep an open mind. Before Eliza could respond, Mary announced that it was time to leave. The walk down to the waiting carriage felt surreal, dreamlike. The servants lined the halls, watching her pass with expressions ranging from curiosity to sympathy. They knew, Eliza realized. Everyone in this house knew this wasn't a love match. The question was whether they also knew what it really was. The village church was small, ancient stone that had stood for centuries. Inside it was nearly empty, just a handful of Adrian's closest associates, people whose names Eliza didn't know, but whose watchful eyes suggested they were more than simple wedding guests. Caroline had explained that Adrian had kept the ceremony deliberately small. Too many witnesses meant too much scrutiny, and scrutiny was dangerous in his line of work. Eliza walked down the aisle alone. Her father hadn't come. She hadn't invited him, and he hadn't asked. Some bridges, once burned, stayed that way. Adrian waited at the altar in formal mourning dress, his expression as unreadable as ever. But when Eliza reached him and he took her hand, his grip was steady, grounding. "Ready?" he murmured, too quiet for the vicar to hear. "No," Eliza whispered back. "But I'm here anyway." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. That's all courage is, showing up when you're terrified. The ceremony itself was mercifully brief. Traditional vows that felt anything but traditional given the circumstances. When Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, a massive sapphire surrounded by diamonds that probably cost more than her family estate, Eliza felt the weight of it like a shackle, or maybe like armor. "You may kiss the bride," the vicar intoned. Adrian's hand came up to cup her face, his touch surprisingly gentle. His eyes met hers, a question in their gray depths, and Eliza gave the smallest nod. Permission granted. The kiss was brief, chaste, appropriate for a church full of witnesses, but even that momentary contact sent a shock through Eliza's system. This was real. This was happening. She was married to the Duke of Shadows, and there was no going back. When Adrian pulled away, he kept his hand on her face for just a moment longer. "Welcome to the game, Duchess," he said softly. "Try not to get killed." Then he was turning, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm, leading her back down the aisle as the small gathering applauded politely. Outside, snow had begun to fall, large, lazy flakes that clung to Eliza's veil and melted against her skin. The carriage ride back to the manor was silent. Adrian stared out one window while Eliza stared out the other, both of them processing what they'd just done. It wasn't until they were nearly home that he finally spoke. "We're hosting a dinner tonight. 20 guests, members of parliament, a few lords, some foreign dignitaries. It's meant to introduce you to society as my wife. And to show your enemies I'm under your protection," Eliza added. "That too." Adrian looked at her then, his expression serious. "They'll try to take your measure, push boundaries, see if you're a weak point they can exploit. You need to be perfect tonight, Eliza. Charming but not naive. Elegant but not soft. Show them the Duchess, not the woman." And what's the difference? The woman has vulnerabilities, the Duchess has none. Eliza turned to face him fully. "You're asking me to perform. I'm asking you to survive. There's a difference." Adrian's jaw tightened. "One of tonight's guests will be Lord Ashford." The name hit like a physical blow. "What? Why would you invite—" "I didn't. He's the guest of Viscount Hammond, one of the foreign dignitaries. Hammond doesn't know what Ashford is, and I can't refuse his guest without causing diplomatic complications." Adrian's voice was tight with controlled fury. "But I need you to understand, Ashford will be in our home tonight. He'll see you as my wife, and he will hate it. Because I'm the asset he lost." "Exactly. Which means he'll try to rattle you, intimidate you, make you understand that just because you're wearing my ring doesn't mean you're safe from him." Adrian reached across the carriage, taking her hand. "Don't let him. Don't give him the satisfaction of seeing fear." Eliza's heart was pounding, but she forced her voice steady. "What do I do if he approaches me?" "Smile. Be gracious. Let him see that you're not just protected, you're untouchable." Adrian's grip tightened slightly. And remember, I'll be watching. The moment he crosses a line, I'll end him. The casual violence in his tone should have frightened her. Instead, Eliza felt something else entirely. Not quite comfort, but close. The knowledge that whatever else Adrian was, he meant what he said about protection. "Tell me about the other guests," she said, shifting to practicalities. "Who else should I be wary of?" Adrian spent the rest of the carriage ride briefing her. Lord Stirling, a member of Parliament with ties to foreign intelligence services. Lady Catherine Vance, a widow whose charm concealed one of the sharpest minds in English society and whose loyalties were perpetually for sale. Ambassador Dmitry Volkov, representing Russian interests and rumored to be involved in several assassination attempts on British operatives. "Your wedding dinner sounds like a gathering of vipers," Eliza observed. "Welcome to my world." Adrian helped her down from the carriage as they arrived back at the manor. "Get some rest. Dinner is at 8 and you'll need your strength." He was right. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation, Caroline helping her choose the right gown, emerald silk that brought out her eyes, Mary styling her hair with the Blackthorne family diamonds, and Mrs. Hawthorne running through the seating arrangements and dinner protocols with military precision. By the time evening arrived, Eliza felt like a soldier preparing for battle. She descended the main staircase at precisely 5 minutes to 8, as Caroline had instructed. Adrian was waiting in the entrance hall, and the look on his face when he saw her made her pause mid-step. "You look—" He trailed off, searching for words. "Like a duchess?" Eliza supplied, her tone dry. "Like someone who could bring kingdoms to their knees," Adrian corrected quietly. He offered his arm. "Ready? To face a room full of enemies while pretending to celebrate my marriage? Absolutely not." His mouth curved. "Then you're exactly where you need to be." The first guests had already arrived, Lord and Lady Pemberton, an older couple whose main distinction seemed to be their ability to gossip at extraordinary speed. Caroline intercepted them with practiced ease, giving Eliza and Adrian a moment to compose themselves. "Stay close to me at first," Adrian murmured. "I'll introduce you, establish the dynamic. After dinner, when things are less formal, you'll have more freedom to move through the room. That's when you listen." "For what?" "Anything that feels wrong. Anything that suggests threat or conspiracy or hidden agenda." His hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "Trust your instincts, Eliza. You're smarter than half these people combined. Use it." Then the next guests were arriving, and Eliza was swept into a performance that would have impressed any theater company in London. She smiled, she charmed, she deflected intrusive questions with grace, and offered just enough warmth to seem genuine without being vulnerable. She was, as Adrian had demanded, perfect. And then Lord Ashford arrived. Eliza felt him before she saw him, a cold prickling at the back of her neck, some primal instinct screaming danger. She turned, Adrian's warning fresh in her mind, and found herself looking at a man who embodied every nightmare her imagination had conjured. Lord Ashford was perhaps 50, impeccably dressed, with the kind of handsome features that might have been charming, if not for the cruelty in his eyes. He moved through the room like a predator, and when his gaze landed on Eliza, she saw recognition flash across his face, recognition and fury. "Your Grace!" Ashford approached with Viscount Hammond in tow, his voice smooth as poison. "What a lovely wedding celebration! And this must be your new Duchess." Adrian's hand tightened fractionally on Eliza's waist. A warning, a promise, a claim all at once. "Lord Ashford, Viscount Hammond, may I present my wife, Eliza, Duchess of Blackthorne?" Eliza extended her hand, forcing herself to meet Ashford's eyes without flinching. "Lord Ashford, how kind of you to attend." Ashford took her hand, his grip just a touch too firm, his fingers lingering a moment too long. "The kindness is all yours, Your Grace. Though I must confess, your marriage came as quite a surprise. I had understood your family's circumstances to be, complicated." The barb was obvious. Eliza felt Adrian tense beside her, but kept her expression serene. "Circumstances change, my lord. Sometimes quite rapidly. One day a woman finds herself in one situation, the next—" She withdrew her hand smoothly. "Well, the next she's a duchess. Fate is unpredictable that way." Something dangerous flashed in Ashford's eyes. "Indeed. Though some might say fate had help. Strategic interventions, one might call them. Strategic interventions, Adrian said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood, are how intelligent men protect what matters to them. I'm sure you understand the concept, Ashford, or have your own business ventures not required similar protections. The threat was unmistakable. Ashford's smile tightened, but Viscount Hammond, blissfully oblivious to the undercurrents, laughed. Business. Always business with you English. Come, Ashford, let's find the brandy and leave these newlyweds to their guests. Your Grace, Duchess, a pleasure. Ashford had no choice but to follow, but not before he leaned close enough for only Eliza to hear. Enjoy your pretty cage, my dear. Even duchesses can be lost if one knows where to look. Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd, leaving Eliza fighting to keep her breathing steady. What did he say? Adrian demanded quietly. A threat, veiled but clear. Eliza met her husband's eyes. He's not going to let this go, is he? No. Adrian's expression was granite. But neither am I. Come, dinner is being announced, and I need you visible and perfect for the next 2 hours. Can you do that? Eliza thought about running, about fear, about the woman she'd been before walking into this nightmare. Then she lifted her chin and smiled. Watch me. Dinner was an exercise in carefully orchestrated warfare. The conversation flowed from politics to trade to society gossip, each topic a potential minefield. Eliza found herself seated between Ambassador Volkov and Lord Stirling, clearly Adrian's way of testing her ability to navigate dangerous company. Volkov was charming in the way of men who'd perfected lying for a living. He asked seemingly innocent questions about her family, her interests, her thoughts on Anglo-Russian relations. Eliza answered carefully, revealing nothing of substance while appearing open and friendly. Stirling was subtler, watching her with calculating eyes while discussing parliamentary matters with the gentleman across from him. But Eliza caught the way his attention kept returning to her, assessing, evaluating, looking for weakness. 3 courses in, Lady Catherine Vance addressed her directly. Tell me, Your Grace, how are you finding married life? It must be quite an adjustment, wedding a man of the Duke's particular reputation. The table quieted slightly. This was a test, Eliza realized. Everyone watching to see if the new Duchess would crack under pressure. Marriage, Eliza said carefully, is always an adjustment, Lady Catherine, but I find that shared purpose makes many things easier. His Grace and I understand each other's value. That's more than many society marriages can claim. Shared purpose? Lady Pemberton leaned forward with barely concealed eagerness. How philosophical, and what purpose might that be? Adrian's hand found Eliza's under the table, a brief touch of warning or support. She couldn't tell which. The usual purposes, Eliza replied with a smile. Managing the estate, supporting each other's interests, perhaps eventually raising a family. The foundations of any strong partnership. It was the perfect answer, traditional enough to satisfy the conservatives, progressive enough to intrigue the reformers, and vague enough to reveal nothing. Around the table she saw approving nods, disappointed frowns from those hoping for scandal, and from Adrian, a look of something almost like pride. The rest of dinner passed in similar fashion, Eliza parrying questions, deflecting intrusions, performing the role of perfect duchess while her mind catalogued every detail, who spoke to whom, who avoided certain topics. The way Lord Stirling and Ambassador Volkov exchanged glances when Adrian mentioned new trade routes. By the time the ladies withdrew for coffee while the men remained for brandy and cigars, Eliza's face hurt from smiling. You were magnificent, Caroline whispered as they moved to the drawing room. Even Lady Catherine looked impressed, and she's impressed by no one. I feel like I just survived a firing squad. You did. And now comes the harder part, the informal socializing where people's guards drop and their real agendas show. Caroline glanced around the drawing room where the other women were settling into comfortable groups. See Lady Vance over there? She's already holding court. Go join her. Listen more than you speak. She'll reveal more than she intends. Eliza took a breath and moved toward the gathering. Lady Catherine saw her approaching and smiled like a cat spotting a mouse. Your Grace, come, tell us about the wedding. Was it terribly romantic, or did the Duke maintain his famous composure even at the altar? The other women laughed, and Eliza settled into a chair accepting coffee from a servant. His Grace, she said carefully, is not given to public displays, but then some men show their devotion in actions rather than words. Actions? Lady Pemberton clasped her hands. How mysterious. What actions do you mean? Eliza thought fast. He's already offered to sponsor my younger sisters for their debuts, ensuring they have opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. I find that speaks to his character more than any romantic gesture. It was brilliant, she realized, even as she said it. It painted Adrian as generous and family-oriented while also establishing that Eliza had value beyond just being his wife. She had family to protect, interests to pursue. She was a person, not a possession. Lady Catherine's eyes sharpened with interest. Your sisters, how many do you have? 2, both younger, both clever and deserving of better prospects than our father's mistakes would have allowed. Eliza met the older woman's gaze steadily. The Duke understood that. Family matters to him, even family he's inherited through marriage. How unusually sentimental, Lady Vance murmured, but there was calculation in her expression now. One hears so many things about the Duke of Blackthorne, that he's cold, ruthless, without human feeling, and yet you paint him as quite the family man. People, Eliza said quietly, are rarely what they appear to be at first glance. I'm learning that society often mistakes privacy for coldness. The Duke simply doesn't perform his humanity for public consumption. Silence fell over the group. Then Lady Catherine laughed. A genuine sound, not her usual calculated amusement. My dear Duchess, I think you may be exactly what this stuffy society needs. Someone willing to speak uncomfortable truths. She leaned forward conspiratorially. Tell me, have you met Lord Ashford yet? I saw him corner you before dinner. The shift in topic was deliberate, testing. Eliza felt the other women's attention sharpen. Briefly, she replied, keeping her tone neutral. He seemed intense. Intense, Lady Catherine's smile turned sharp. What a diplomatic word for it. The man's a vulture, though few will say it aloud. He circles the desperate and the vulnerable, offering help at prices most don't realize they're paying until it's too late. You sound as if you speak from experience, Lady Catherine. I speak from observation, Your Grace. I've watched Ashford operate for 20 years. He's clever. I'll give him that. Stays just barely on the right side of the law while conducting business that would make devils blush. She sipped her coffee thoughtfully. I imagine the Duke was quite pleased to remove you from Ashford's orbit. Eliza's heart stopped. I'm sorry? Oh, don't look so shocked. Lady Catherine waved a dismissive hand. Everyone who matters knows your father's debts were purchased by Ashford. Everyone also knows the Duke swept in and made a counteroffer your father couldn't refuse. What we don't know is why the Duke cared enough to intervene. Her eyes glittered with curiosity. Unless you'd like to enlighten us. This was it. The moment where Eliza could reveal too much or too little, where one wrong word could confirm suspicions or create new ones. She thought of Adrian's warnings, his lessons about survival in this world. Show them the Duchess, not the woman. The Duke, Eliza said clearly, doesn't discuss his business decisions with me, and I don't pry. But if you're asking whether I'm grateful he chose to marry me rather than let my father's creditors choose my fate, the answer is yes, absolutely yes. I may not have chosen this marriage initially, but I choose it now, every day. The honesty of it seemed to catch them off guard. Lady Pemberton actually looked moved, while the other ladies murmured approval. Even Lady Catherine seemed satisfied, settling back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. Well said, Your Grace. Well said indeed. The conversation shifted to safer topics after that. Fashion, the upcoming season, harmless society gossip. But Eliza felt the weight of Lady Catherine's scrutiny throughout, the sense of being continuously evaluated. When the men finally rejoined them, Adrian appeared at her side almost immediately. A word, Duchess? His hand extended, helping her rise from her chair. To the room, it looked like a husband claiming his wife's attention, but Eliza felt the tension in his grip. He led her to a relatively quiet corner, his expression controlled but his eyes intense. Ashford just tried to recruit Lord Stirling for some venture he claims will revolutionize the London docks. Stirling seemed interested. That's bad? The docks are where half of London's smuggling operations run through. If Ashford gets official backing from Parliament— Adrian stopped himself, clearly editing for public consumption. We'll discuss it later. For now, I need you to do something for me. What? Ashford is leaving in approximately 10 minutes. When he does, I want you visible and clearly content, laughing, relaxed, every inch the happy bride. Let him see that his threats mean nothing. Adrian, please, Eliza. His voice dropped lower. I need him to believe he has no power over you, over us. Just 10 minutes of performance, and then I promise you can rest. Eliza looked into her husband's face and saw something beyond calculation, concern. Maybe even the first hint of genuine care. This mattered to him, not just strategically, but personally. All right, she agreed. 10 minutes. Adrian's relief was visible. Thank you. Then louder. For anyone listening, shall we take some air, my dear? The drawing room has grown rather warm. He led her toward the terrace doors, and Eliza played her part perfectly. Leaning into him slightly, laughing at something he murmured that she didn't even hear, performing contentment with every gesture. They stepped onto the terrace, and the cold night air hit like a slap. Below them, she could see guests beginning to depart, footmen bringing around carriages. And there, Lord Ashford, climbing into an elegant black coach, his face turned up toward the terrace, toward them. Adrian's arm slipped around Eliza's waist, pulling her close against his side. To anyone watching, it looked like affection, but Eliza felt the rigid tension in his body, the controlled violence of a predator watching prey escape, for now. Smile, Adrian murmured against her temple. Show him he lost. So Eliza smiled, let herself relax into Adrian's embrace, even turned her face up toward his as if seeking a kiss, though he didn't take the invitation, just looked down at her with an expression that anyone watching would interpret as desire. Below them, Ashford's face twisted with fury before he disappeared into his carriage. The moment the coach pulled away, Adrian released her, stepping back with professional distance. Well done. Is that what our marriage will be? Eliza asked, suddenly exhausted. Performances and strategies and showing enemies were untouchable? Adrian looked at her for a long moment. I don't know, he said finally, but I know we survived tonight. That's enough for now. The rest of the guests departed over the next hour. Eliza stood beside Adrian at the door, playing the gracious hostess, accepting congratulations and well wishes from people who would probably discuss her at every dinner party for the next month. When the last carriage finally rolled away, she felt like she might collapse. Come, Caroline said gently, appearing at her elbow. Let's get you upstairs. You've more than earned your rest. But as they turned toward the stairs, Adrian caught Eliza's hand. Wait. He looked at Caroline. Could you give us a moment? Caroline's eyebrows rose, but she nodded and disappeared down the corridor, leaving them alone in the suddenly quiet entrance hall. What is it? Eliza asked. Adrian seemed to struggle with words, unusual for a man so controlled. Finally, you did better than I expected tonight. Better than I had any right to ask. I know this isn't what you wanted, any of this, but you handled it with grace and intelligence, and He stopped, clearly uncomfortable with whatever he was trying to express. You're welcome, Eliza said quietly. But Adrian, I need to know, is it always going to be like this? Enemies at dinner, threats disguised as courtesy, every conversation a battlefield? Yes. The honesty was brutal. This is my world, Eliza. This is what I do, who I am. And now it's your world, too. Tonight was gentle compared to what's coming. What do you mean, what's coming? Adrian glanced around, ensuring they were truly alone, then lowered his voice. Ashford's threat wasn't idle. He will come for you, one way or another, either to hurt me or to reclaim what he considers his lost property. And when he does, I need to know you can protect yourself. Dread pooled in Eliza's stomach. You said marrying me made me untouchable. It makes you expensive to touch. There's a difference. Adrian's hand came up, cupping her face with surprising gentleness. Which is why tomorrow we begin your real training. Not just observation and intelligence gathering. Defense, survival, everything you need to know to stay alive when I'm not here to protect you. You're scaring me. Good. Fear makes you careful. Careful keeps you breathing. He dropped his hand. Get some rest. Tomorrow, everything changes. He turned and walked away, leaving Eliza standing alone in the enormous entrance hall, her wedding ring heavy on her finger and her husband's warning echoing in her mind. Tomorrow, everything changes. She made her way upstairs slowly, her mind spinning. In her chambers, Mary had laid out a nightgown and turned down the bed. Through the connecting door, Eliza could see light beneath the frame. Adrian, presumably in his own rooms. Her husband, her protector, her jailer. She wasn't sure which role mattered most. Eliza changed and climbed into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept replaying the evening. Ashford's threat, Lady Catherine's probing questions, Adrian's warning about what was coming. This was her life now. Strategic dinners and hidden enemies and a marriage that was really a partnership in survival. A soft knock at the connecting door made her sit up. "Come in," she called, expecting a servant. Adrian entered, still fully dressed, carrying a small wooden box. He paused when he saw her expression. "I'm not here to... This isn't..." He stopped, clearly frustrated with himself. "I have something for you." Eliza pulled her robe on and sat up straighter. "What is it?" Adrian crossed to the bed and set the box on the covers between them. "Open it." Inside, nestled in velvet, was a small pistol. Elegant, deadly, sized for a woman's hand. Eliza stared at it. "You're giving me a gun." "I'm giving you options." Adrian's voice was quiet. "Starting tomorrow, I'll teach you how to use it properly. But tonight, I need you to know it's here. That if anyone comes through that door who shouldn't, if I'm not here and you're in danger, you have recourse." "Adrian, I don't know if I could actually shoot someone." He reached into the box, carefully lifting the pistol and checking it was unloaded before placing it back. "Neither do I, but I'd rather you have the choice and never need it than need it and not have it." Eliza looked from the gun to her husband's face. "This is really happening, isn't it? Everything you warned me about, the danger, the enemies, the threats, it's all real." "It's all real," Adrian confirmed. "And I'm sorry for that. If I could have found another way to protect you. But you couldn't." "No, I couldn't." He stood, preparing to leave. "The gun stays with you. Keep it close. Learn where it is in the dark so you can find it without thinking. And Eliza," she looked up at him, "if you ever have to use it, don't hesitate. Promise me that. Don't hesitate." Then he was gone, the connecting door closing softly behind him, leaving Eliza alone with a pistol and the growing realization that her marriage wasn't just a strategic alliance. It was a war zone, and she had just enlisted as a soldier. The thought kept Eliza awake for hours, staring at the wooden box on her nightstand. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting silver shadows across the pistol's polished surface. She'd never touched a weapon in her life. The closest she'd come to violence was watching her father lose his temper and smash furniture during particularly devastating gambling losses. Now she was being armed against threats she couldn't fully comprehend. Sleep finally came near dawn, restless and filled with dreams of masked men and locked doors. When Mary arrived at 7 to help her dress, Eliza felt more exhausted than when she'd gone to bed. "His Grace requests you join him in the east courtyard after breakfast," Mary said, laying out a simple day dress in dark blue wool. "He says to wear something you can move in." The training, of course. Eliza ate breakfast alone. Adrian and Caroline had already finished, then made her way to the east courtyard. It was a private space, walled on all sides, invisible from the main grounds. Adrian was waiting, dressed in shirt sleeves despite the cold, talking quietly with a man Eliza didn't recognize. The stranger was older, perhaps 60, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent years in harsh conditions and the precise movements of a trained fighter. "Duchess," Adrian said when he saw her. "This is Sergeant Thomas Brennan, retired from Her Majesty's service. He's agreed to assist with your instruction." Brennan bowed slightly, his eyes sharp as they assessed her. "Your Grace, forgive my bluntness, but have you ever defended yourself physically? Unless you count slapping my cousin when I was 12. No." A smile ghosted across Brennan's weathered features. Then we start from the beginning. Duke, if you'll excuse us, the lady and I have work to do. Adrian hesitated, and Eliza saw something flicker in his expression. Concern, maybe, or doubt about whether she could handle what was coming. I'll be fine, she said, more confidently than she felt. Go. Do whatever dukes do. Dukes, Adrian replied dryly, attend Parliament and pretend to care about crop rotation debates. I'd rather stay and watch you learn to break a man's wrist. Then you'll distract me. Go. He went, though not without a backward glance that Eliza felt like a physical touch. Brennan waited until Adrian was gone before speaking again. His Grace cares about you. That's good. Means you have someone watching your back, but it also makes you a target. He moved to the center of the courtyard. Come here, Your Grace. Let me see your stance. The next 2 hours were brutal. Brennan was patient but merciless, teaching Eliza how to stand, how to move, how to use an attacker's momentum against them. He showed her vulnerable points on the human body, eyes, throat, knees, and made her practice strikes until her arms ached. You're smaller than most men who'd threaten you, Brennan explained. So you can't fight with strength. You fight with speed, precision, and viciousness. No honor in survival, Your Grace. Only living and dying. By the time he finally called a halt, Eliza was sweating despite the cold, her muscles trembling with exhaustion. Not bad for a first session, Brennan said, which felt like high praise from such a taciturn man. We'll do this every morning. 6 weeks, and you'll be dangerous. 3 months, and you'll be deadly. I don't want to be deadly, Eliza protested. I just want to be safe. In your world, Duchess, those are the same thing. Adrian appeared as Brennan was leaving, his expression unreadable as he took in Eliza's disheveled state. How did she do? She'll live, Brennan replied, if she keeps training and doesn't do anything stupid. He nodded to Eliza. Tomorrow, 7 sharp. Don't be late. When they were alone, Adrian handed Eliza a towel. You're shaking. I'm exhausted. She wiped sweat from her face. Is this really necessary? The fighting training? You tell me. Do you want to be helpless if someone comes for you? No, but I also didn't expect marriage to include learning how to gouge out eyes. Adrian's mouth twitched. Most marriages don't, but then most husbands aren't in my line of work. He glanced toward the house. Come. There's something else you need to see. He led her back inside, but instead of heading to the main wing, he took her down to the cellars, past the wine storage, past the preserved goods, to a door Eliza had never noticed before. Adrian produced a key from his pocket and unlocked it, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Where does this go? Eliza asked. Somewhere that doesn't officially exist. The stairs descended deep beneath the manor, ending in a corridor lit by oil lamps. Adrian led her past several locked doors until they reached one at the very end. Inside was a room that looked like it belonged in a government building, not a private estate. Maps covering the walls, filing cabinets labeled with codes, a large table scattered with documents and photographs. This is where I actually work, Adrian said, watching her reaction. My real office. The one upstairs is for show. Eliza moved through the room, taking it all in. One wall was dedicated to Lord Ashford. Photographs of his known associates, records of his properties, ledgers tracking suspected criminal activities. Another wall showed a network of connections between various lords and foreign agents, threads of influence and corruption spreading like a spider's web. This is bigger than just protecting me from Ashford, isn't it? She said quietly. Much bigger. Ashford is one piece of a larger puzzle. The Crown believes there's a conspiracy forming, influential men working with foreign powers to destabilize England from within. We've been gathering evidence for months, but we need more. Names, meeting locations, financial records. Adrian moved to stand beside her, his voice grim. And we need to move fast. There's intelligence suggesting something significant is being planned. An attack or an assassination or a coup. We don't know yet. Eliza's mind raced. And you think I can help with this? How? Society gatherings. The places where wives meet for tea and gossip while their husbands are at Parliament or their clubs. Women hear things, Eliza. They're privy to conversations men assume they don't understand or care about. Adrian pulled out a file, handing it to her. Lady Catherine Vance. You impressed her last night. She's invited you to her salon this Thursday. Eliza opened the file. Inside were reports on Lady Catherine, her financial situation, her associates, her suspected activities as an information broker. You want me to spy on her? I want you to listen. Lady Catherine knows things. She trades in secrets. If you can gain her trust, become part of her inner circle, she might reveal something about this conspiracy. Exactly. Adrian's hand touched her shoulder. But I need you to understand the risk. If Lady Catherine suspects you're gathering intelligence, if she realizes you're working with me, she'll burn you, publicly, viciously. She's done it before to people who crossed her. And if I don't do this, if I refuse to spy? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then we find another way. I won't force you, Eliza. This has to be your choice. Eliza looked at the walls of evidence, the intricate web of conspiracy and corruption. She thought about Brennan's words. In your world, Duchess, those are the same thing. Safe and deadly, intertwined. I'll do it, she said, but I want full briefings. Everything you know about Lady Catherine, about this conspiracy, about what you suspect is coming. No more partial truths. Agreed. Adrian seemed to relax slightly. We have 3 days before the salon. I'll teach you what to listen for, how to guide conversation without seeming to, how to remember details when you can't write them down. You really have thought of everything. I've had to. People die in this work when they don't prepare. His voice softened. I don't want you to be one of them. The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning neither seemed ready to acknowledge fully. Eliza broke the moment by turning back to the files. Show me everything, she said. If I'm going to do this, I need to do it right. They spent the rest of the morning in that underground office, Adrian walking Eliza through intelligence reports and teaching her the basics of information gathering. He was a good teacher, patient, thorough, treating her like a capable partner rather than a decorative wife who needed protecting. It was almost enough to make her forget this wasn't a normal marriage. Almost. That evening, Caroline joined them for dinner, her usual brightness dimmed by something that looked like worry. She pushed food around her plate, unusually quiet, until Adrian finally set down his fork. What's wrong? Caroline glanced at Eliza, then back to Adrian. I received a letter today from Lord Ashford. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Adrian's voice went dangerously soft. What did it say? He's invited me to a house party at his country estate next month. He says it's time I was introduced to society beyond your immediate circle, that I'm in danger of becoming too isolated at Blackthorne Manor. Caroline's hands twisted in her lap. Adrian, I know what kind of man he is. I know why he's really inviting me. To get to me, Adrian said flatly, by threatening you. Or worse, Eliza spoke up, her mind racing through implications. He could compromise her reputation, force a marriage, use her as leverage, any number of things. Caroline nodded miserably. I wanted to refuse immediately, but my friends say declining such an invitation without cause would be seen as an insult. There would be social consequences. Then let there be consequences, Adrian snapped. You're not going anywhere near Ashford's estate. But what do I tell people? How do I explain? You don't explain anything. Adrian was already standing, pacing. You're my ward, under my protection. That's explanation enough. Eliza watched the exchange, an idea forming. It was risky, possibly insane, but it might work. What if she doesn't refuse? She said slowly. Both Adrian and Caroline turned to stare at her. Are you mad? Adrian demanded. Ashford would... Not if I go with her. Eliza stood, moving toward the intelligence she'd absorbed that morning. Think about it. A house party means dozens of guests, all of Ashford's associates and allies gathered in one place. It's an intelligence opportunity we might never get again. Absolutely not. Adrian, listen to me. Eliza faced him directly. You said yourself we need names, connections, evidence. Ashford's house party would have all of that. And with Caroline and me there, we could access areas, conversations that your male agents never could. Caroline was shaking her head. Eliza, you don't know what you're suggesting. Ashford's parties are notorious, the things that happen there, which is exactly why we'd be safe, Eliza interrupted. If he truly crosses a line with the Duchess of Blackthorne under his own roof, with dozens of witnesses, Adrian would destroy him, and Ashford knows it. He might threaten, might intimidate, but he won't actually harm us, not publicly. You're betting your life on that assumption, Adrian said coldly. I'm betting on the fact that Ashford is a predator who relies on secrecy and leverage. Public scandal doesn't serve him. And we wouldn't be alone. You could have men positioned nearby, watching, ready to intervene if needed. Adrian stared at her like she'd suggested walking into a fire. No, I won't risk it. It's not your risk alone to refuse. Eliza moved closer, lowering her voice. You asked me to be your partner in this, to help gather intelligence, to be brave enough to face your world. Well, this is me facing it. Let me do this. You've been my wife for one day, Eliza. You're not ready for... Then when will I be ready? She challenged. After a month? A year? When Ashford has found another way to threaten what you care about. When whatever conspiracy you're tracking has already succeeded. She took a breath. I'm not asking permission, Adrian. I'm telling you this is what I'm going to do. The question is whether you'll work with me or against me. Silence fell. Caroline looked between them, clearly holding her breath. Adrian's jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. For a moment, Eliza thought he might forbid it outright, might lock her in her rooms and refuse to listen. Then he turned away, moving to the window, his shoulders rigid with tension. If you do this, he said finally, his voice barely controlled, you follow every protocol I establish, every safety measure, every contingency plan. You don't improvise, you don't take unnecessary risks, and if I tell you to leave, you leave immediately. No arguments. Agreed. And you train, every day until then. Brennan pushes you twice as hard. You learn to shoot that pistol I gave you, and you carry it every moment you're at that house party. Agreed. He turned back and Eliza saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not for himself, for her. And you understand that if this goes wrong, if Ashford realizes what you're doing, I might not be able to reach you in time. You could be hurt, or worse, before I can intervene. I understand. Eliza crossed to him, placing her hand on his arm. But I also understand that hiding won't keep me safe. You said it yourself. I'm already a target. I'd rather be a target who fights back. Adrian covered her hand with his, the touch gentle despite his tension. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most reckless. Can't I be both? Despite everything, he almost smiled. Apparently. He looked at Caroline. Write to Ashford. Accept the invitation. 2 guests, you and the Duchess. I'll arrange security and begin planning. Caroline nodded, still looking worried. This is truly insane. Yes, Adrian agreed, but your new cousin has a talent for insanity. His hand tightened on Eliza's. I hope we all survive it. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Mornings with Brennan, learning to fight, to move, to think like someone who expected violence. Afternoons in the underground office with Adrian, studying intelligence reports, and learning the art of subtle interrogation disguised as conversation. Evenings practicing with the pistol in the private shooting range Adrian maintained beneath the manor, until Eliza could load and fire in darkness without fumbling. And throughout it all, Lady Catherine's Thursday Salon, where Eliza began building relationships with society's most influential women. She learned to laugh at cruel jokes while mentally cataloging who said what about whom. She mastered the art of seeming frivolous while actually being intensely observant. She became, slowly, the Duchess Adrian needed her to be. But the cost was exhaustion that went bone deep and a growing awareness that she was becoming someone she didn't entirely recognize. You're changing, Caroline observed one evening as they prepared for another society dinner. You move differently now, talk differently. Even your expressions are more controlled. Is that bad? Eliza asked, adjusting the sapphires at her throat. I don't know. You seem stronger, more confident, but also harder. Caroline met her eyes in the mirror. Don't lose yourself in this, Eliza. Don't become so focused on survival that you forget how to live. The words haunted Eliza through the dinner, through the carefully managed conversations and strategic pleasantries. Was she losing herself? Or finally finding the woman she'd always had the potential to be? She didn't have an answer. The night before they were to leave for Ashford's estate, Adrian summoned her to his study, the real one, underground. When she arrived, she found him poring over maps and contingency plans, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. I can still call this off, he said without preamble. One word from you, and we find another way. I'm not backing out. You should. This is too dangerous. Too soon. He finally looked at her, and Eliza saw the toll this was taking on him. If something happens to you, it won't. You can't know that. Adrian moved around the desk, stopping in front of her. I've sent operatives into dangerous situations before. Lost some of them. But I've never sent someone He stopped himself. Someone you what? Eliza asked quietly. Someone I'm married to, he finished, but they both knew that wasn't what he'd started to say. The protocols are simple. You and Caroline stay together at all times. You carry the pistol I gave you. You memorize the locations of my men. There will be 5 positioned around the estate, and you remember the signal. They'd practiced this. 3 quick pulls on the bell cord in any room meant immediate danger. Adrian's men would move in within minutes. I remember everything, Eliza assured him. We'll be careful. Careful doesn't matter if Ashford suspects. Adrian's hands came up to frame her face, the touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. Promise me something. What? If it comes down to a choice between the intelligence and your safety, choose safety. Every time. Information can be gathered another way. I can't replace you. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Eliza's breath caught at the vulnerability in it, at the realization that somewhere in the past 3 weeks, this had become more than strategy for both of them. I promise, she whispered. Adrian's thumb brushed her cheekbone, and for a moment Eliza thought he might kiss her. Not the chaste touch at their wedding, but something real, something that acknowledged what was growing between them. Instead, he dropped his hands and stepped back. Get some rest. The carriage leaves at dawn. Eliza wanted to say something, to acknowledge what had almost happened, to name the shift in their relationship. But the words wouldn't come, so she simply nodded and left. In her chambers, she packed the small valise she'd prepared. Elegant dresses for public appearances. The pistol, hidden in a specially designed pocket. A small notebook disguised as a diary for recording observations. Everything she needed to be the perfect society guest while actually being a spy. Sleep was impossible. She lay awake, listening to the house settle around her, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Dawn came too quickly. The journey to Ashford's estate took most of the day. Caroline kept up nervous chatter for the first few hours before falling into worried silence. Eliza watched the countryside roll past, mentally reviewing everything Adrian had taught her. Stay observant. Trust no one. Watch for threats disguised as hospitality. Ashford's manor appeared in the late afternoon, a sprawling Gothic structure that made Blackthorne Manor look modest by comparison. As their carriage rolled up the drive, Eliza saw other vehicles arriving, society's elite gathering for 3 days of carefully curated debauchery. Ready? Caroline whispered as footmen opened their door. No, Eliza admitted, but we're doing this anyway. Lord Ashford himself greeted them at the entrance, his smile all charm and menace. Lady Caroline, and your grace, what an honor to host the new Duchess of Blackthorne. I do hope you'll find our entertainments educational. I'm sure we'll find them memorable, Lord Ashford, Eliza replied smoothly, refusing to be intimidated. A housekeeper led them to adjoining rooms in the east wing. The quarters were luxurious but isolated. Eliza noted they were far from the main guest areas, accessible by a single corridor. Easy to monitor, easy to trap. Well, Caroline said once they were alone, we're here. Now what? Now we smile and observe and try very hard not to die, Eliza replied, checking that her pistol was properly concealed. Simple. Caroline's laugh was slightly hysterical. I think Adrian's insanity is contagious. The first evening's dinner was an exercise in controlled tension. 30 guests, all of them connected to Ashford, in ways Eliza was still mapping. She recognized Lord Stirling from her wedding dinner and several faces from Lady Catherine's salon. Others were strangers, foreign accents suggesting international interests, calculating expressions suggesting dangerous allegiances. Ashford placed Eliza at his right hand, a position of honor that felt more like a threat. Throughout the meal, he engaged her in conversation that seemed pleasant on the surface but carried undertones of malice. Tell me, Your Grace, how are you finding married life? The Duke is so often occupied with his business ventures. You must find the manor quite lonely. On the contrary, I find I'm never alone. His Grace has been most attentive. How fortunate. Though one wonders what truly occupies a man of his reputation. All those trips to London, all those private meetings. Ashford's smile sharpened. One might suspect affairs of the heart, or perhaps affairs of state. The probe was obvious. Eliza kept her expression blandly pleasant. I suspect he's occupied with the same things that occupy all men of property and influence, Lord Ashford. The tedious business of managing wealth and responsibility. Tedious indeed, Ashford sipped his wine. Though some men make their wealth through rather less tedious means. Trade in goods that society pretends don't exist. Commerce that happens in shadows rather than sunlight. He was testing her, Eliza realized, seeing if she'd react, if she understood the implications. She thought of Adrian's training and kept her face neutral. How fascinating. I'm afraid I know little of commerce, my lord. Ladies aren't generally educated in such matters. Aren't they? Ashford's hand landed on hers where it rested on the table, his grip just a touch too firm. I think you're more educated than you pretend, Your Grace. I think the Duke chose you for more than your pretty face. Eliza met his eyes directly, refusing to flinch. Then perhaps you should ask yourself why a man known for strategic thinking would choose a wife he couldn't control. What that choice reveals about his plans. She'd meant it as deflection, but Ashford's expression shifted. Surprise, then calculation, then something that looked almost like respect. Indeed, he murmured, releasing her hand. What an interesting question. After dinner, the guests separated. Men to the smoking room, women to the music room. Eliza and Caroline joined the ladies, and Eliza immediately began working. She moved through the room, listening to conversations, mentally cataloging connections and comments. Two women discussing their husband's recent trip to Portsmouth, near naval installations. A cluster gossiping about Lord Stirling's new French mistress, possible foreign connection. Lady Margaret Ashford, the Lord's sister, mentioning a private meeting scheduled for tomorrow night that ladies weren't invited to attend. That last one made Eliza's pulse quicken. A private meeting here, during the house party. Exactly the kind of intelligence Adrian needed. She caught Caroline's eye across the room and gave the signal they'd agreed on. A slight adjustment of her bracelet. Caroline nodded almost imperceptibly. Message received. The evening ended near midnight. As guests retired, Eliza found herself walking the corridor back to her room alone. Caroline had been cornered by Lady Margaret for conversation. The hallway was dimly lit, shadows pooling in corners, and Eliza felt the weight of the pistol hidden in her dress like a promise. She was nearly to her door when she heard footsteps behind her. Your Grace. A word. She turned to find Lord Ashford approaching, alone, the jovial host replaced by something far more predatory. It's late, Lord Ashford. Perhaps we might speak in the morning. This won't take long. He moved closer, backing her against the wall with his proximity. Not touching, but close enough that Eliza could smell brandy on his breath. I want you to understand something. Whatever game you and your husband think you're playing, whatever you hope to accomplish by coming here, it won't work. I don't know what you mean. Eliza kept her voice steady even as her heart raced. Don't you? You're intelligent, Your Grace. You've been watching, listening, cataloging. Did you think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't recognize an intelligence operative when she's standing in my home? Fear spiked through Eliza, but she forced herself not to react. You're mistaken. I'm simply a duchess attending a house party. You're a weapon your husband aimed at me, and I want you to know. His hand came up, not quite touching her face, but close enough to be a threat. Weapons can be turned against those who wield them. They can be broken. They can be used. Eliza's hand moved toward the pistol hidden in her dress, but Ashford caught the motion and smiled. Go ahead. Shoot me in my own home, surrounded by witnesses. I'm sure that would end well for you. He leaned even closer. Or perhaps we can come to an understanding. You're a beautiful woman trapped in a marriage to a cold, calculating man. I could offer you so much more than protection and strategy. I could offer you power of your own. I have power, Eliza said quietly, more than you know. Do you? Then use it. Walk away from this house tonight. Take Lady Caroline and leave. Because if you stay, if you continue this game, you'll discover that I play it far better than you do. He stepped back then, his expression returning to pleasant neutrality, as if the threat had never happened. "Good night, Your Grace. Do sleep well. Tomorrow will be, eventful." He walked away, leaving Eliza shaking against the wall. She waited until he disappeared before moving to her door, her hands trembling so badly she could barely work the lock. Inside, she collapsed into a chair, her breath coming in sharp gasps. He knew. Ashford knew exactly what she was doing here. And instead of throwing her out or confronting Adrian, he'd issued a warning disguised as an offer, which meant he wanted her to stay, wanted her to keep playing the game. But why? A soft knock at the connecting door to Caroline's room made Eliza jump. "Come in," she called, trying to steady her voice. Caroline entered, her face pale. "Did Ashford stop you in the corridor?" "Yes. Did he threaten you too?" "Not directly, but Lady Margaret made several pointed comments about how dangerous it is for young ladies to involve themselves in matters they don't understand." Caroline sat down heavily. "Eliza, they know. All of them. This whole house party. It's a trap." Eliza's mind raced through implications. "Then we need to leave. Now, before what?" A new voice interrupted. Both women spun toward the door to find it open. 3 men standing in the corridor. Not Ashford's servants, not guests. Men with hard faces and harder eyes, the kind who did violence for profit. "Before you cause any more trouble, Your Grace," the lead man said, stepping into the room. Behind him, Eliza heard doors being locked, footsteps in the corridor. More men securing the wing. Caroline grabbed Eliza's hand, her fingers ice cold. "What do you want?" "Lord Ashford's compliments," the man replied. "He requests you remain in your rooms tonight. For your own safety, of course. Tomorrow, after the private meeting concludes, you'll be free to leave. But for now," he smiled without warmth, "consider yourselves his guests in a more permanent capacity." They were being imprisoned. Eliza's hand moved toward her pistol, but there were 3 of them and they were armed. If she drew now, they'd shoot, and Caroline would be caught in the crossfire. "This is kidnapping," she said instead, her voice shaking with fury rather than fear. "The Duke of Blackthorne will—" "The Duke of Blackthorne," the man interrupted, "is exactly who Lord Ashford is counting on. See, Your Grace, you're not here as a spy. You're here as bait." He pulled the door closed. "Sweet dreams, ladies. Try not to do anything foolish. My men will be watching." The lock clicked into place, followed by the sound of a heavy bar being dropped across the outside. They were sealed in. Caroline moved to the window, trying the latch. Locked from the outside. We're 3 stories up. Even if we could break the glass. "We'd break our necks in the fall," Eliza finished. She pulled out the pistol finally, the weight of it both comforting and useless. "We need to signal Adrian." "How? They've cut us off from the bell cords, and the guards will hear if we try anything." Eliza moved through the room, thinking frantically. There had to be a way. Adrian's men were positioned around the estate. If they could just— The candle. She moved to the window, pulling back the curtain. In the distance, she could see the lights of other buildings, the dark shapes of gardens and outbuildings. Adrian had said his men would be watching, looking for signals. "Help me with this," she told Caroline, grabbing the candlestick from the mantel. Together, they positioned themselves at the window, and Eliza began the pattern Adrian had taught her. 3 long flashes, 2 short, repeated 3 times. Danger. Immediate extraction needed. In the darkness beyond the estate, something moved. A brief flash of light. Acknowledgement. Help was coming. But as footsteps approached in the corridor outside and she heard Ashford's voice giving orders to his men, Eliza realized help might not arrive in time. They'd walked directly into the trap, and now they'd have to survive it long enough for Adrian to reach them. If he could reach them at all. The minutes crawled past like hours. Eliza and Caroline sat in tense silence, listening to footsteps in the corridor, voices conferring in low tones. The guards had settled into position, at least 2 men stationed outside their door, possibly more at the end of the hallway. Every escape route sealed. "How long before Adrian's men arrive?" Caroline whispered, her face pale in the candlelight. "I don't know. Could be minutes, could be hours." Eliza checked the pistol again, counting bullets she already knew were there. 6 shots. Not nearly enough if things went truly wrong. We need to assume we're on our own until then. Against how many men? 4? 5? Caroline's voice cracked slightly. Eliza, we can't fight our way out of this. No, but we might be able to think our way out. Eliza moved to the connecting door between their rooms, examining the lock. It was old, substantial, but it opened inward. If we can get into the corridor, we might reach the servants' stairs. From there, a crash from somewhere below made them both freeze. Shouting erupted, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Adrian's men. They were here. Stay behind me, Eliza ordered, raising the pistol toward the door. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. Weeks of training with Brennan taking over, muscle memory overriding fear. The lock rattled. Someone was trying to get in, cursing as they fumbled with keys. Finally, the door burst open and one of Ashford's guards stumbled through, his attention fixed on the chaos erupting downstairs. He saw Eliza too late. She didn't hesitate, didn't think. Just squeezed the trigger the way Brennan had taught her, aiming for center mass. The recoil jolted her arms. The guard went down with a cry of pain, clutching his shoulder. She'd hit him, though not fatally. Caroline screamed. Eliza's ears rang from the gunshot in the enclosed space. Move! Eliza grabbed Caroline's hand, pulling her over the writhing guard and into the corridor. Another guard appeared at the end of the hallway, raising his weapon. Eliza fired again, forcing him to dive for cover. The shot went wide, splintering wood paneling, but it bought them seconds to run. They made it to the servants' stairs just as more gunfire erupted from the main house. The narrow staircase was dark, treacherous, but Eliza didn't slow. Down one floor, then another, Caroline stumbling behind her, both of them gasping for breath. They emerged into a service corridor near the kitchens. Staff were fleeing in panic, screaming about armed men and violence. Through the windows, Eliza could see muzzle flashes in the darkness. Adrian's operatives engaging Ashford's guards across the grounds. The stables, Caroline panted. If we can reach the horses. No, too exposed. Eliza's mind raced through the estate's layout, information Adrian had made her memorize. The conservatory, glass walls, multiple exits, and it backs onto the gardens where Adrian's men are positioned. They ran, keeping to the shadows, the sounds of fighting growing louder. The conservatory's door was unlocked. Why secure a greenhouse when you had armed men securing the house? Inside, moonlight filtered through glass panels, illuminating exotic plants and the humid air heavy with the scent of orchids. Eliza was halfway across the room when a voice stopped her cold. Going somewhere, Your Grace? Lord Ashford stepped from behind a towering fern, a pistol in his hand. He looked disheveled, his earlier composure cracked by fury. Behind him, 2 more guards emerged, weapons drawn. It's over, Ashford, Eliza said, raising her own pistol. Her hand didn't shake. The Duke's men are here. You're finished. Am I, or have I simply forced your husband's hand? Ashford moved closer, circling like a predator. You think this is about you? You think I trapped you here just to hurt the Duke? How small-minded! He gestured toward the house with his weapon. This whole evening was designed to draw out Blackthorne's network. Every man he sent, every operative he positioned, my men are identifying them right now. By morning, the entire intelligence network will be compromised. Horror crashed over Eliza. You're using us to expose his agents. I'm using you to destroy his operation entirely. The Crown's precious shadow network dismantled in one night. Ashford's smile was vicious. And the Duke himself is on his way here now, isn't he? Probably riding like a madman to save his precious wife. He'll arrive to find his network burned and his Duchess dead. Poetic, really. You'll never get away with this. Too many witnesses, too much attention. Oh, there'll be a tragic story. A house party attacked by revolutionaries. Foreign agents seeking to destabilize England by targeting its nobility. You and Lady Caroline caught in the crossfire, killed before anyone could save you. Ashford's tone turned mocking. The Duke will be devastated, of course, but he'll have no proof it was anything but terrible luck. Caroline's hand found Eliza's, squeezing tight. 3 against 2, and Eliza only had 4 bullets left. The mathematics of survival weren't in their favor, but mathematics didn't account for desperation. One problem with your plan, Eliza said, her voice steadier than she felt. You're assuming we'll go quietly. She fired, not at Ashford, but at the glass panel behind him. It shattered in a cascade of crystal, the crash echoing through the conservatory. The guards jerked toward the sound, startled. Eliza fired twice more in rapid succession, once at each guard, forcing them to dive for cover behind planters. Then she grabbed Caroline and ran for the shattered opening. They crashed through into the gardens just as Ashford's shot rang out behind them. Something burned across Eliza's upper arm, a graze. Painful, but not incapacitating. She kept running, pulling Caroline with her, heading for the dark shapes of trees where Adrian's men had been positioned. "Here!" a voice called from the shadows. One of Adrian's operatives, a man whose face Eliza recognized from briefings. "This way, Your Grace." They stumbled into the cover of the trees just as more of Ashford's men emerged from the house. The operative, Matthews, Eliza remembered his name was Matthews, positioned himself between them and danger. "How many hostiles?" he asked, his weapon trained on the conservatory. "At least a dozen, maybe more. They've been identifying your positions." Eliza gasped for breath, adrenaline making her words tumble out. This whole thing was a trap to expose the Duke's network. Ashford's planning to— "We know. The Duke figured it out about an hour ago." Matthews fired 2 shots, driving back an approaching guard. "He's coming with reinforcements, but we need to hold until then." "How long?" 20 minutes. Maybe less if he rides like I think he will." Matthews glanced at them. "Can you shoot, Your Grace?" Eliza held up her pistol, now down to 1 bullet. "Not anymore." Matthews reached into his coat, pulling out a second weapon and spare ammunition. "Then learn fast. We're outnumbered 3-1, and they know these grounds better than we do." The next 15 minutes were chaos. More of Adrian's men converged on their position, creating a defensive perimeter around Eliza and Caroline. Ashford's guards pressed in from multiple sides, trying to overwhelm them through sheer numbers. The gardens erupted in gunfire. The peaceful estate transformed into a battlefield. Eliza found herself shooting at shadows, her training taking over even as her mind reeled from the unreality of it all. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a gentleman's daughter who'd never held a weapon. Now she was crouched behind a stone fountain, trading shots with men trying to kill her. Caroline huddled beside her, tears streaming down her face, but her jaw set with determination. When one of Adrian's men went down with a wound to his leg, Caroline didn't hesitate. She crawled to him through the gunfire and dragged him back to cover, her hands shaking but sure as she tried to stop the bleeding. "You're insane," the wounded operative gasped. "Both of you are absolutely insane." "We learned from the best," Eliza replied, firing again. Then, cutting through the chaos, a new sound. Hoofbeats, dozens of them, approaching fast. Through the darkness, Eliza saw riders cresting the hill, torches blazing. At their head, unmistakable even at a distance, was Adrian. He'd brought what looked like half the Crown's military forces. "Hold fire!" Matthews shouted to the defensive perimeter. "Friendlies incoming!" Adrian's forces swept into the estate like a storm. Ashford's remaining guards, seeing themselves suddenly and catastrophically outnumbered, began surrendering. Some tried to flee into the darkness and were run down by mounted operatives. Within minutes, the battle that had raged for nearly an hour was over. Adrian dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, scanning the gardens with desperate intensity until his eyes found Eliza. The relief that crossed his face was so profound it was almost painful to witness. He crossed to her in long strides, his hands coming up to frame her face, his eyes searching for injuries. "You're hurt." "Just a graze." "I'm fine." Eliza's own hands were shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. "Adrian, it was a trap. Ashford was trying to—" "I know. We intercepted communications an hour after you signaled. I came as fast as I could." His thumb brushed the cut on her arm, his jaw tightening. "You're bleeding." "I'm alive. We both are." She glanced at Caroline, who was still helping the wounded operative. "We defended ourselves. We held out." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, pride mixing with residual fear. "You did more than hold out. Matthews told me you shot 3 men and used the conservatory glass as a tactical diversion. Where did you learn that?" "From you. From Brennan. From 3 weeks of assuming I might die at any moment." Eliza's laugh was slightly hysterical. "I was terrified, Adrian. The whole time, I was absolutely terrified." Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. Adrian's cat slid to the back of her neck, pulling her forehead to his. I thought I'd lost you. When we realized what Ashford had planned, when I understood you were trapped here. But you came. Eliza's hands fisted in his coat. You brought an army, and you came. I would have brought the entire kingdom if necessary. His voice was rough, raw with emotion he'd never let show before. You're my wife, Eliza, my partner, my... Whatever he was about to say was interrupted by a commotion near the house. Soldiers were dragging someone out in chains. Lord Ashford, his earlier composure completely shattered, screaming about rights and false accusations and diplomatic consequences. Adrian's expression went cold. He released Eliza and strode toward the prisoner, every inch the Duke of Shadows society feared. Lord Ashford, how unfortunate to find you engaged in treason against the crown. Treason? This is absurd. I've committed no... You imprisoned a Duchess and her companion. You orchestrated an attack on crown operatives, and... Adrian pulled a packet of papers from his coat. We have evidence of your correspondence with French agents, your plans to destabilize England's intelligence networks, and your involvement in a conspiracy that reaches into Parliament itself. Ashford's face went ashen. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. You see, while you were busy using my wife as bait, my other agents were raiding your London offices. They found quite the archive. Adrian's smile was sharp enough to cut. Your sister was very helpful once she understood the alternative was being charged as an accomplice. Margaret would never... Lady Margaret has been feeding us information for 6 months. She approached us after she discovered what you really did to acquire your wealth. Adrian gestured to the soldiers. Take him. He'll await trial in the tower. As Ashford was dragged away, still protesting, Adrian turned back to his assembled forces. His voice carried across the gardens, clear and authoritative. Secure the estate. I want every guest questioned, every document seized, every connection to this conspiracy identified. As of this moment, this house party is a crime scene, and everyone here is a witness. The soldiers moved with efficient precision, years of training evident in their coordination. Within minutes, confused and frightened guests were being herded into the main drawing room, separated from Ashford's known associates who were being detained. Eliza watched it all with a mixture of exhaustion and surreal disbelief. They'd survived. Against impossible odds, through blind terror and desperate action, they'd actually survived. Caroline appeared at her side, her dress torn and blood-stained, her hair falling from its pins. She looked nothing like the proper young lady who'd arrived at the estate yesterday. Is it really over? She asked quietly. This part is, Eliza replied. But there's still a conspiracy to unravel. Ashford was just one piece. Then we're not finished. It wasn't a question. Eliza looked at her cousin by marriage and saw the same transformation she felt in herself. The frightened girl who'd received Ashford's invitation was gone, replaced by someone who'd faced death and discovered she was capable of fighting back. No, Eliza agreed. We're not finished. Adrian returned, bringing a military surgeon to tend their wounds. The graze on Eliza's arm was cleaned and bandaged, painful but superficial. Caroline had bruises and scrapes from their escape through the house. The wounded operative Caroline had saved would recover, thanks to her quick action. You should rest, Adrian said once the surgeon had finished. Both of you. We'll be here for hours yet, processing the scene. I want to help, Eliza said. The guests, I know most of them from Lady Catherine's salon. I can identify who might have information, who's likely involved. Eliza? Don't. She cut him off firmly. Don't tell me to rest while you work. Don't send me away to be protected while you unravel what I helped expose. I'm your partner, remember? You said it yourself. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, some internal battle playing out behind his eyes. Finally, he nodded. All right, but you work with my supervision, and if you show any sign of shock or exhaustion, you stop immediately. Agreed. They spent the next 3 hours methodically processing the guests. Eliza proved invaluable, her weeks at Lady Catherine's salon giving her insights into relationships and allegiances that Adrian's operatives had missed. She identified which women were likely to know about their husbands' business dealings, which ones seemed genuinely shocked by the evening's violence, versus those whose fear seemed performative. It was Lady Catherine herself who provided the breakthrough. She was brought to the library where Adrian had established his command center, her usual composure cracked, but not broken. She took one look at Eliza, disheveled, armed, clearly working alongside the Duke rather than cowering in protection, and something like respect crossed her face. "Well," Lady Catherine said dryly, "I see I severely underestimated you, Your Grace." "Most people do," Eliza replied. "It's useful that way." "I imagine it is." Lady Catherine settled into a chair without being asked, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. "I assume you want information. What makes you think I have any?" "Because you trade in secrets, Lady Catherine. You always have." Adrian moved to stand beside Eliza, presenting a united front. "And because you've been watching this conspiracy form for months, gathering intelligence, waiting to see which side would prevail before choosing your allegiance." Lady Catherine's smile was thin. "You give me too much credit, Your Grace." "Do I? Then explain why you've attended every social gathering where conspiracy members were present. Why you've cultivated relationships with the wives of men involved. Why you've been so interested in the new Duchess of Blackthorne." Adrian's voice hardened. "You've been hedging your bets, Catherine, gathering information to sell to whoever won. But tonight, you saw which side has the crown's full backing." Silence stretched. Lady Catherine studied them both, calculation clear in her expression. Finally, she sighed. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Names, meeting locations, financial arrangements, the full scope of the conspiracy." Adrian pulled out a chair sitting across from her. "And in exchange, your involvement remains unofficial." "Meaning I won't hang for treason?" "Meaning you'll be a valuable asset rather than a convicted criminal. Your choice." Lady Catherine considered for perhaps 10 seconds. Then she began to talk. Over the next hour, she laid out a conspiracy that went deeper than anyone had suspected. Members of Parliament, foreign agents, even minor members of the royal household, all connected through a network designed to destabilize England's government and replace it with something more amenable to foreign influence. Ashford had been a key financier, but there were others. Bigger players, more dangerous threats. Eliza listened, cataloging names and connections, her mind already working through implications. This wasn't just about exposing traitors. It was about preventing a coup. When Lady Catherine finally finished, exhaustion evident in every line of her face, Adrian called for an escort to take her to guest quarters under guard. "One more thing," Eliza said before Catherine left. "Why help us now? You could have stayed silent, claimed ignorance." Lady Catherine looked at her with something almost like fondness. "Because I've survived 30 years in society by recognizing power when I see it. And you, my dear Duchess, are going to be far more powerful than anyone realizes." She paused at the door. "Besides, I've always preferred backing winners. And watching you fight your way out of that conservatory, I knew which side was going to win." After she'd gone, Eliza turned to find Adrian watching her with an unreadable expression. "What?" she asked. "You've changed. In 3 weeks, you've become someone I barely recognize." Eliza felt a flicker of uncertainty. "Is that bad?" "No, it's extraordinary." Adrian moved closer, his hand coming up to touch her face with infinite gentleness. "You were always brave. That's why I chose you. But now you're dangerous, strategic, everything I needed and more than I dared hope for." "I'm still terrified most of the time," Eliza admitted. "Tonight, when Ashford had us trapped, I thought we were going to die." "But you didn't panic. You fought. You thought tactically even under pressure." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "You've become the partner I needed. The Duchess this work requires, and I—" He stopped, the words seeming to catch in his throat. Eliza waited, her heart pounding, sensing he was on the edge of admitting something neither of them had dared speak aloud. "You what?" she prompted softly. "I'm beginning to care for you in ways I never planned, in ways that complicate everything." His voice dropped lower. "In ways that make me want to lock you away somewhere safe and never let you near danger again, even though I know you'd hate me for it." Eliza's breath caught. This was the closest Adrian had come to admitting feelings beyond strategic partnership. "Adrian, I know it's not what you signed up for. I know this marriage was supposed to be an arrangement, nothing more. But somewhere between teaching you to shoot and watching you face down armed men without flinching, He stopped again, frustration clear in his expression. I don't know how to do this. Care for someone. Trust someone with more than just intelligence work. Then we'll learn together. Eliza's hands came up to cover his where they framed her face. Because I'm beginning to care for you too. Somewhere between learning your secrets and becoming your partner, you stopped being just the cold Duke who bought me. You became someone I actually want to stand beside. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Adrian's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for deception, finding only truth. We're terrible at this, he said finally, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. At what? Marriage? Partnership? Feelings? All of it. But his smile widened slightly. Though we're getting better at not dying, that's progress. Eliza laughed, slightly hysterical from exhaustion and relief and the emotional whiplash of the past 24 hours. That's the saddest measurement of a successful relationship I've ever heard. Welcome to my world. Adrian pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Eliza let herself lean into the embrace. They stood there in the library while soldiers worked outside, while evidence was catalogued and prisoners were processed, just holding each other in the quiet aftermath of violence. What happens now? Eliza asked eventually. Now we dismantle the conspiracy, arrest the key players, present evidence to the crown. Adrian's hand stroked her back absently. It'll take months, maybe years, and it'll be dangerous. The people we're exposing won't go quietly. Will you let me help? Actually help, not just gather intelligence at tea parties? After tonight? After watching you fight your way out of a trap that should have killed you? Adrian pulled back to look at her. I don't think I could stop you if I tried. You've proven you're more than capable. Then we do this together, as actual partners. As partners, Adrian agreed, though I reserve the right to be terrified for your safety. And I reserve the right to ignore your terror and do what needs doing anyway. Fair enough? Adrian's hand came up to cup her face again. We should get you home. You've been shot at, grazed by a bullet, and fought off multiple armed men. Even you must have limits. I'm fine. I can... Eliza stopped as the room tilted slightly, adrenaline crash finally hitting. Actually, home sounds good. Adrian caught her as she swayed, his arm solid around her waist. Matthews, bring the carriage around. The Duchess and Lady Caroline are returning to Blackthorne Manor. The journey home was a blur. Caroline fell asleep almost immediately, exhaustion claiming her. Eliza fought to stay awake, watching Adrian's profile in the darkness, seeing the tension that still hadn't left his shoulders. You were afraid, she said quietly, when you realized we were trapped. I've never seen you afraid before. I've never had someone I couldn't afford to lose before, Adrian replied, not looking at her. It's inconvenient. Caring for people usually is. Eliza's hand found his in the darkness. But maybe it's worth it anyway. Adrian's fingers laced through hers, holding tight. Ask me again in a few months, when we're not actively being shot at. It's a date. They reached Blackthorne Manor as dawn was breaking, painting the moors in shades of gold and rose. Mrs. Hawthorne met them at the door, her usual stern composure cracking when she saw their condition. Your Grace, Lady Caroline, what happened? Long story, Caroline mumbled, heading straight for the stairs. Involving treason, gunfights, and why I'm never attending another house party. I'm going to sleep for approximately 3 days. Eliza followed more slowly, Adrian's hand still in hers. At the top of the stairs, outside her chamber door, he paused. Thank you, he said quietly, for being brave enough to walk into that trap, for surviving it, for becoming exactly what I needed, even though I had no right to ask it of you. You didn't ask. I chose. Eliza stood on her toes, pressing a kiss to his cheek. And I'll keep choosing, every day. Because apparently, I married a dangerous spy master and decided I liked the adventure. Adrian's laugh was soft, genuine, the sound of ice finally cracking. Get some rest, Duchess. We have a conspiracy to destroy. We do indeed. Eliza went to her chambers, finally allowing exhaustion to claim her. She fell asleep still wearing her torn, blood-stained dress, the pistol Adrian had given her within reach on the nightstand. And for the first time since arriving at Blackthorne Manor, she felt like she'd truly earned her place there. Not as a purchased bride, not as a strategic asset, but as the Duchess who'd fought back and survived. The woman who'd become the Duke of Shadow's true equal. The woman who'd become the Duke of Shadow's true equal. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of strategic warfare waged in drawing rooms and parliament chambers instead of conservatories and gardens. The conspiracy Ashford had been part of proved even more extensive than Lady Catherine's initial intelligence suggested. Each arrest led to new names, new connections, a web of treason that stretched from London's docks to the halls of power itself. And at the center of it all, working alongside Adrian with increasing confidence and skill, was Eliza. She'd become something society didn't quite know how to categorize. Too involved in her husband's business to be a proper decorative duchess, too effective to be dismissed as merely ambitious. The women who'd once evaluated her over tea now watched her with wary respect. The men who'd underestimated her learned quickly that the Duchess of Blackthorne had a mind as sharp as any intelligence operative. But it was the Crown's recognition that truly changed everything. The summons arrived on a gray morning in early spring. Eliza was in the underground office with Adrian, reviewing reports from agents tracking the conspiracy's financial networks, when Mrs. Hawthorne appeared with an expression of barely concealed shock. "Your Grace! Your Graces!" She stumbled over the plural, clearly flustered. "Her Majesty has sent a representative. She requests an audience with both of you at the palace this afternoon." Adrian and Eliza exchanged glances, the Queen herself. This was either extraordinary recognition or they were about to be arrested for overstepping their authority. "Did the representative indicate the nature of the audience?" Adrian asked carefully. "Only that it concerns matters of national security and that Her Majesty wishes to personally commend certain recent actions." Mrs. Hawthorne paused. She specifically mentioned the Duchess by name. After she left, Eliza turned to Adrian with raised eyebrows. "Commendation or trap?" "With the Crown, sometimes both." But Adrian was smiling slightly. "Though I suspect if we were in trouble, she'd have sent soldiers instead of a polite invitation." They prepared carefully. Eliza chose a gown that walked the line between elegant and authoritative, deep burgundy silk with minimal adornment, the Blackthorne diamonds at her throat. She looked every inch a duchess, but also every inch a woman who'd fought armed men and lived to tell the tale. The carriage ride to the palace was tense. Caroline had wanted to come, but Adrian had gently refused. This audience was specifically for the Duke and Duchess, and bringing additional parties might seem presumptuous. So Caroline remained at the manor, pacing anxiously while Eliza and Adrian faced whatever awaited them. The palace was as imposing as Eliza had imagined, all soaring architecture and centuries of power contained in stone and gilt. They were led through corridors lined with portraits of monarchs past, each one seeming to judge their worthiness, until they reached a private receiving room. Queen Victoria sat near a window, smaller than her portrait suggested, but radiating authority that needed no physical stature to enforce. She was perhaps 40, her face showing the weight of ruling an empire, but her eyes were sharp and assessing as Eliza and Adrian were announced. "Your Majesties," Adrian said, both of them dropping into appropriate bows. "Duke Blackthorne, Duchess Blackthorne. Please, sit." The Queen gestured to chairs arranged before her. "We have much to discuss." They sat, Eliza's hands folded carefully in her lap, her heart pounding despite her calm exterior. Whatever happened next would define their future, and possibly England's. "We have been following your work with great interest," the Queen began, her voice clear and precise. "The conspiracy you have been unraveling, it goes deeper than even our own security advisors suspected. Lord Ashford, Lord Sterling, members of our own household staff. The scope of the betrayal is staggering." "Your Majesty," Adrian said carefully, "we've worked to be thorough and discreet." "Discreet?" The Queen's eyebrow rose. "Duke, you arrested a sitting member of Parliament in his own home, exposed a foreign intelligence network operating out of the London docks, and dismantled a financial scheme that was funneling Crown resources to enemy powers. I would hardly call that discreet." Eliza felt her stomach drop. They'd overstepped. They'd moved too fast, too publicly, and now they'd pay the price for it. But then the Queen smiled. I call it magnificent. The shock must have shown on their faces because the Queen's smile widened. Did you think we were displeased? Quite the contrary. You've done in 3 months what our official intelligence services failed to accomplish in 3 years. You've protected the realm, preserved the stability of our government, and done so with remarkable efficiency. Thank you, Your Majesty, Adrian managed, clearly as surprised as Eliza. But what truly impresses us, the Queen continued, her attention shifting to Eliza, is the Duchess. Eliza's breath caught. Your Majesty? We have read the reports, Duchess Blackthorne. All of them. Not just the sanitized versions meant for public consumption, but the detailed intelligence assessments. We know what happened at Ashford's estate. We know you held off armed men while your husband's forces approached. We know you've been instrumental in gathering intelligence from sources your husband's male operatives could never access. The Queen leaned forward slightly. And we know that you have fundamentally redefined what it means to be a duchess in service to the crown. The words hung in the air, weighted with implications Eliza was almost afraid to parse. She'd expected acknowledgement, perhaps. Gratitude, possibly. But this felt like something more. We have a proposition for you both, the Queen said. The conspiracy you've exposed. It's larger than Ashford, larger than the names you've already arrested. There are elements within foreign governments, within our own aristocracy, that continue to work against England's interests. We need them stopped, permanently. Your Majesty is asking us to continue our work? Adrian asked. We are asking you to formalize it, to create an official intelligence service under Crown authority with resources and legal backing that your current, improvised network lacks. The Queen's expression grew serious. And we are asking the Duchess to serve not as a consultant or assistant, but as a full partner in this endeavor, with rank, authority, and recognition of her contributions. Eliza couldn't breathe. This was beyond anything she'd imagined. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm not qualified. You fought off armed men with limited training and improvised tactics. You infiltrated a conspiracy by attending tea parties and asking seemingly innocent questions. You've proven yourself more qualified than half the military officers in our service. The Queen's voice softened slightly. And you've done something we thought impossible. You've made your husband actually work with a partner instead of alone in the shadows. That alone is worthy of recognition. Adrian made a sound that might have been a laugh or a protest. Eliza couldn't tell which. There will be opposition, the Queen continued. Men who believe women have no place in intelligence work. Those who think the Duchess of Blackthorne should be hosting parties, not dismantling conspiracies. But we will back you, fully, publicly. And those who oppose you will have to answer to us directly. Eliza looked at Adrian, questions in her eyes. His expression was unreadable, but he gave a small nod. Your choice, the gesture said. Whatever you decide, I'll support it. She turned back to the Queen. What exactly would this position entail? Joint leadership of a new intelligence division reporting directly to the Crown. You would have agents under your command, resources at your disposal, and legal authority to pursue threats to England's security. You would also have enemies, those who resent your authority, who seek to undermine your work, who will use every tool at their disposal to see you fail. The Queen's eyes held Eliza's. It will be dangerous, difficult, and you will be constantly judged by standards no man would face. But you will also save lives, protect the realm, and prove that women can serve their country in ways beyond what society currently imagines. Eliza thought of the woman she'd been 4 months ago, powerless, traded to settle debts, furious at her lack of choices. Then she thought of who she'd become, armed, trained, capable of facing threats that would have destroyed that earlier version of herself. I accept, she said clearly, on one condition. The Queen's eyebrow rose. You would condition your acceptance of a royal commission? I would ensure its success, Your Majesty. Eliza met the monarch's gaze steadily. If I'm to do this work, I need Lady Caroline Ashworth included in the operation. She's proven herself resourceful, brave, and capable of maintaining composure under pressure, and I need full authority to recruit other women who show similar aptitude. If we're creating something new, let's make it actually effective rather than just symbolic. For a long moment, the Queen simply looked at her, Then she laughed, a genuine sound of surprised delight. You negotiate with the crown itself. Remarkable. The Queen nodded. Your conditions are accepted. Lady Caroline shall have a position if she wishes it, and you may recruit whom you see fit, subject to appropriate vetting. She stood, and Adrian and Eliza immediately rose as well. We shall make the announcement at the state dinner next week. Prepare yourselves. Society will not know what to make of you. They were dismissed with royal efficiency, ushered back through corridors to their waiting carriage. Neither spoke until they were well away from the palace, the weight of what had just happened settling over them. Did that actually occur? Eliza asked finally. Or did I imagine the entire thing? If you imagined it, we're sharing the same delusion. Adrian was smiling, genuinely smiling in a way Eliza had rarely seen. You just negotiated terms with the Queen of England. I may have been momentarily insane. You were magnificent. Adrian took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Though I have to ask, when exactly did you decide you wanted Caroline involved? About 3 seconds before I said it. But it made sense. She's proven herself, and we need people we can trust absolutely. Eliza paused. You're not angry I made demands without consulting you first? Angry? Eliza, I'm in awe. I've worked for the crown for 12 years and never once had the courage to condition my service on anything. You did it in your first royal audience. He lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. You're either the bravest woman alive or the most reckless. I still haven't decided which. You said that once before, the night before Ashford's house party. And I'm no closer to an answer now than I was then. Adrian's expression grew more serious. But I'm certain of one thing. Whatever comes next, whatever enemies we make or battles we fight, I want you beside me, not behind me, not protected from it. Beside me, as an equal. Is this your way of saying you've fallen in love with your own wife? Eliza asked, half teasing, but also genuinely curious. Adrian was quiet for a moment, considering. When he spoke, his voice was careful, but honest. I don't know if I know how to love someone. I've spent so long building walls, maintaining distance, never letting anyone close enough to matter. But I know that when you were trapped at Ashford's estate, I would have burned down half of England to reach you. I know that watching you work, seeing you think strategically and refuse to back down from challenges, makes me feel things I didn't think I was capable of. And I know that the idea of doing this work without you feels incomplete. That's the most emotionally repressed declaration of love I've ever heard, Eliza said, but her eyes were bright. But I'll take it. And you? Adrian asked. How does the woman who is furious at being purchased like property feel about the man who bought her? I think, Eliza said slowly, that somewhere between learning to shoot and fighting for my life, I realized you didn't buy me. You gave me the tools to become who I was always meant to be. You saw potential everyone else dismissed. You treated me like an equal when society said I was barely a person. She squeezed his hand. So yes, Adrian Blackthorne, I think I've fallen in love with you. Despite your emotional walls and your dangerous work and your terrible habit of thinking you can protect everyone by keeping them at arm's length. We're terrible at this, Adrian said, echoing his words from months ago. We really are. Eliza leaned against his shoulder. But we're getting better. They rode the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, both processing the magnitude of what had just been offered and accepted. When they arrived at Blackthorne Manor, Caroline met them at the door, practically vibrating with curiosity. Well, what did the Queen want? Are we in trouble? Do I need to pack for exile? No exile, Eliza said, pulling her into the drawing room where they could talk privately. Actually, she wants you to join a new intelligence division. If you're interested. Caroline's eyes went wide. She what? Wants you to be a spy, Adrian supplied helpfully. Officially, with crown backing and everything. What? Caroline looked between them, clearly struggling to process. Why would she want me? Because you dragged a wounded operative through gunfire to save his life. Because you kept your head during a crisis that would have broken most people. Because you're clever and observant and Eliza trusts you. Adrian's expression softened slightly. And because we're building something new. Something that recognizes women can serve their country in ways beyond hosting tea parties. Caroline sat down heavily. This is insane. Completely, Eliza agreed, but also potentially brilliant. You'd have training, resources, protection. You'd be doing work that actually matters instead of just attending parties looking for a husband. Would it be dangerous? Extremely, Adrian said, never one to sugarcoat reality. Would I have to keep attending those awful society dinners? Probably, but with purpose behind them. Caroline looked at her hands, clearly thinking hard. Then she looked up with a smile that was pure determination. When do we start? The week before the state dinner was chaos. Adrian worked with Crown officials to establish the new intelligence division's structure and authority. Eliza began quietly recruiting women who'd shown aptitude for observation and strategic thinking, several from Lady Catherine's salon, others recommended by trusted sources. Caroline threw herself into preliminary training with Brennan, who declared her a faster learner than Eliza had been, much to Eliza's mock offense. And through it all, society buzzed with rumors. The Duchess of Blackthorne was being given some kind of official role. The Queen herself was making an unprecedented announcement. Speculation ran wild, theories ranging from the plausible to the absurd. The night of the state dinner arrived with the weight of history behind it. Eliza dressed in a gown of midnight blue silk, the Blackthorne sapphires glittering at her throat and wrists. She looked every inch a duchess, but also every inch a woman who'd earned her position through courage rather than birth. Adrian waited at the bottom of the stairs, devastating in formal evening wear. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression: pride, desire, and that careful affection he was slowly learning to show. Ready to change the world, Duchess? Ready to try, at least. Eliza took his offered arm, though I reserve the right to be terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it, I know. You've told me that approximately 100 times. Then perhaps it's finally sinking in. The palace ballroom was magnificent, filled with England's most influential citizens. Eliza recognized faces from her various intelligence-gathering operations. Some allies, some suspects, all watching with barely concealed curiosity as she and Adrian made their entrance. Lord Stirling was notably absent, having been quietly arrested 2 weeks prior. Several other conspiracy members were similarly missing, their absences explained away as illness or travel, but understood by those who mattered as disgrace and detention. Lady Catherine appeared at Eliza's elbow almost immediately, resplendent in silver silk and her usual knowing smile. Your Grace, I hear congratulations are in order, though no one seems quite sure what we're congratulating you for. You'll find out soon enough, Eliza replied, along with everyone else. How delightfully mysterious. Though I suspect I already know, Lady Catherine's voice dropped lower. And I want you to understand whatever opposition you face from this, whatever small-minded fools decide to make trouble, you have my support. Quiet support, naturally, but support nonetheless. Thank you, Catherine. That means more than you know. Oh, I know exactly how much it means. Why do you think I'm offering it? Lady Catherine's smile turned sharp. Besides, I've been betting on you since that first dinner at Blackthorne Manor. I'd hate to see my investment wasted. The Queen's arrival was announced with appropriate ceremony. Everyone bowed as she entered, magnificent in royal regalia, every inch the monarch. She moved through this room with practiced grace, acknowledging greetings, before finally taking her position at the head of the ballroom. Lords and ladies, honored guests, the Queen began, her voice carrying clearly across the vast space. We are gathered tonight not merely for celebration, but for recognition. Our realm faces threats both foreign and domestic. Forces that would see England weakened, our people divided, our power diminished. These threats require constant vigilance, strategic thinking, and individuals brave enough to stand against darkness. The room had gone utterly silent, everyone straining to hear. For many years, the Duke of Blackthorne has served the Crown in matters of national security, working tirelessly to protect our realm from those who would do it harm. His efforts have been instrumental in maintaining England's stability and safety. The Queen's gaze found Adrian in the crowd, but in recent months, he has had an unexpected partner, someone who has proven that service to the Crown knows no gender, that courage and intelligence are not the sole province of men. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several women leaned forward with visible interest. Several men's faces darkened with disapproval. The Duchess of Blackthorne, the Queen continued, has distinguished herself through actions that many would find unthinkable for a woman of her station. She has gathered intelligence, exposed traitors, and faced armed enemies with remarkable composure. She has fundamentally redefined what it means to serve one's country. Eliza felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She kept her expression calm, her posture perfect, refusing to show the nervousness churning beneath her surface composure. Therefore, it is our pleasure to announce the formation of a new intelligence division operating under direct Crown authority. This division will be jointly led by the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorne, with full power to recruit agents, gather intelligence, and pursue threats to England's security. The Queen paused, letting the announcement sink in. And it is our further pleasure to announce that this division will actively recruit women of capability and courage, recognizing that England's safety requires all its citizens' talents, regardless of gender. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, applause began. Tentative at first, then building. The women in the room clapped enthusiastically, many with visible emotion on their faces. Some of the men joined in, those progressive enough to see the strategic value. Others stood with arms crossed, fury barely concealed. The Queen wasn't finished. Let it be known throughout our realm, those who oppose this initiative oppose the Crown itself. Those who seek to undermine the Duchess's authority challenge our direct command. And those who believe women incapable of such service are cordially invited to explain their position to us personally. That got a few nervous laughs. No one challenged the Queen personally if they valued their position or their freedom. Adrian's hand found Eliza's, squeezing gently. "We did it," the touch said. "You did it." After the Queen's announcement, society didn't quite know what to do with Eliza. The progressive faction sought her out, asking questions about recruitment and expressing interest in joining the new division. The conservative faction whispered in corners, clearly scandalized but unable to oppose the Queen's direct endorsement. And throughout it all, Eliza moved through the ballroom with grace and confidence, every inch the woman she'd fought so hard to become. It was near midnight when Lord Pemberton, one of the more vocal opponents of women in intelligence work, approached her with barely concealed hostility. "Your Grace, quite the elevation in status. One wonders if it's truly merited or simply the Queen's sentimentality toward a pretty face." Adrian stepped forward, clearly ready to intervene, but Eliza touched his arm lightly. "Let me handle this." "Lord Pemberton," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "I'm sure you're simply curious rather than insulting. Allow me to clarify. My elevation, as you call it, comes from exposing a conspiracy that reached into Parliament itself, preventing what would have been a devastating coup, and personally defending myself and Lady Caroline against armed men while my husband's forces approached. But please, do feel free to question whether that's sufficient qualification. I'm sure the Queen would be fascinated by your assessment." Pemberton's face went red. Several people nearby had turned to listen, and now several were smirking at his obvious discomfort. You merely meant to suggest I don't belong in this position. I understand. You're not the first man to underestimate me, Lord Pemberton, and you won't be the last. But here's what I've learned. Underestimation is a tactical advantage. It means my opponents never see me coming until it's too late. Eliza's voice stayed pleasant, but her eyes were hard. So please, do continue underestimating me. I find it makes my work so much easier. She walked away before he could respond, leaving him sputtering while those who'd witnessed the exchange either hid smiles or looked thoughtful about what they'd just heard. "That was savage," Caroline whispered, appearing at her side. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." "You're safe. You save wounded operatives under fire. That earns permanent good side status." "Thank heavens." Caroline glanced around the ballroom. "Do you realize what we've done? Actually done? We've changed what's possible for women in this country." "We've started to," Eliza corrected. "There's still so much resistance. So many people who think this is temporary or symbolic or will collapse the moment we make a mistake." "Then we won't make mistakes." Caroline's voice was fierce. "We'll be so good at this work that they can't dismiss it. We'll prove that women can do this job as well or better than men. and will open doors for others who come after us. Eliza looked at her cousin by marriage, this young woman who'd been terrified at Ashford's house party and had emerged as a force to be reckoned with, and felt a surge of pride. Yes, she agreed. We will. The night wound down eventually, guests departing with much to discuss. The carriage ride home was quiet, all three of them, Adrian, Eliza, and Caroline, lost in thoughts about what the future would bring. At Blackthorne Manor, Caroline immediately excused herself to bed, exhausted from the evening's intensity. Adrian and Eliza stood in the entrance hall, alone for the first time since the Queen's announcement. It's really happening, Eliza said softly. We're actually doing this. Having second thoughts? Terror thoughts, maybe, but not second ones. She looked up at him. Are you sure you're ready for this? Sharing leadership? Giving up complete control of operations? Honestly, no. I've worked alone for so long that partnership still feels foreign. Adrian's hand came up to cup her face. But I'm learning. And I'd rather learn with you than work alone. That's growth. I'm proud of you. Don't mock my emotional development. It's fragile. Eliza laughed, the sound echoing through the quiet manor. I'm not mocking. I'm genuinely proud. You've come a long way from the cold Duke who summoned me to his study 4 months ago. And you've come a long way from the furious woman who told me she refused to be property. I'm still furious sometimes, still fighting against limitations society wants to place on me. Eliza's expression grew more serious. But now I have the tools to fight back, and a partner who actually supports that fight rather than trying to cage me for my own protection. I've learned that trying to cage you just results in you breaking free and doing something even more dangerous to prove a point. Exactly. I'm so glad you're finally catching on. Adrian pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist. Dance with me. There's no music. Then we'll make our own. They swayed together in the silent entrance hall, moonlight streaming through the windows, the weight of 4 months of transformation settling around them like a cloak. From desperate arrangement to genuine partnership. From strategic necessity to something that felt increasingly like love. What are you thinking? Adrian asked softly. That 4 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be dancing with my husband after being commissioned by the Queen to lead an intelligence division, I would have thought they were insane. And now? Now I think maybe insanity is just another word for courage. Eliza looked up at him. Or maybe I've simply become as mad as you are. Probably that second one. Adrian's smile was soft, genuine. But I find I quite like you this way. Dangerous and unpredictable? Brave and brilliant, capable and fierce. Everything I needed and nothing I expected. His hand came up to tilt her chin. May I kiss you? Properly this time, not for performance or appearances? I've been waiting for you to ask that for weeks. The kiss was nothing like their chaste wedding touch, or the strategic shows of affection for observers. It was real, messy, and imperfect, and full of all the emotion they'd been carefully containing for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said quietly. I'm still terrible at it, still learning what it means to let someone matter this much. But I love you, Eliza Blackthorne. Completely, inconveniently, dangerously. I love you too, Eliza whispered back. Even though you're emotionally repressed and strategically manipulative and have a terrible habit of thinking you always know best. We're a disaster. We're magnificent. Both can be true. They stood there in the moonlight, holding each other. Two people who'd started as strangers bound by necessity and had somehow become partners bound by choice. Outside, the moors stretched endlessly, wild and untamed. Inside, warmth and possibility and the beginning of something that felt like home. What happens now? Eliza asked eventually. Now we build something unprecedented. We recruit the best people we can find, regardless of gender. We protect England from threats both foreign and domestic. We prove that the Queen's faith in us, in you, wasn't misplaced. Adrian pulled back to look at her. And we do it together, as equals, because I finally understand that's the only way anything truly important gets done. That's quite the agenda. We've accomplished more impossible things in 4 months. What's a few more? Eliza smiled, fierce and bright. Then, let's get started. In the weeks that followed, they did exactly that. The intelligence division took shape with remarkable speed. Adrian's organizational expertise combined with Eliza's talent for reading people and identifying potential. Caroline proved invaluable, her social connections and fresh perspective bringing insights the more jaded operatives missed. They recruited 12 women in the first month, each one carefully vetted, each one bringing unique skills to the work. Some were society ladies who'd spent years perfecting the art of observation while being dismissed as frivolous. Others were working-class women who understood networks of information invisible to the aristocracy. All of them were hungry for purpose beyond what society had offered them. The training facility they established beneath an unassuming townhouse in London became legendary. Women learning to shoot, to fight, to gather intelligence, to think strategically. Brennan ran combat training with his usual lack of sentiment, treating the women with the same demanding standards he'd applied to Eliza. They rose to meet those standards and often exceeded them. By summer, the new division had prevented 2 assassination attempts, exposed a smuggling network operating out of Portsmouth, and dismantled a blackmail scheme targeting members of Parliament. The successes were quiet, intelligence work usually was, but those who mattered noticed. And slowly, grudgingly, even the harshest critics had to admit that perhaps the Queen had been right. Perhaps women could serve their country in ways beyond what tradition dictated. The transformation wasn't just institutional, it was personal. 6 months after that state dinner, Eliza stood in the same underground office where Adrian had first revealed his real work, now expanded to accommodate their growing operation. Maps covered every wall. Reports flooded in from agents across England and beyond. It looked like the nerve center of something significant. Because it was. Adrian entered carrying tea, a domestic gesture that still amused Eliza, given his reputation as the cold Duke of Shadows. He set a cup beside her, his hand lingering on her shoulder. "How's the recruitment assessment going?" "Promising. 3 more candidates showing real aptitude. One of them is a fisherman's daughter from Cornwall, with an extraordinary memory for detail. Another is a widow who speaks 5 languages and has contacts throughout Europe." Eliza looked up at him. "We're building something remarkable, Adrian, something that's going to outlast us both." "That's the goal. Legacy beyond individual lives." He leaned down to press a kiss to her temple. "Though I'm in no hurry to end my individual life. I'm rather enjoying it lately." "Are you?" The great Duke of Blackthorne admitting to enjoyment? Someone note this down for the history books. Mock me all you want. You're the one who taught me it was possible to have a life beyond the work. It was true. Over the past months, they'd found balance, moments of genuine partnership and even happiness interwoven with the dangerous, necessary work. Quiet dinners, morning rides across the moors, evenings in the library reading by the fire, no intelligence reports or strategic planning, just being together. The work remained dangerous. They'd faced threats, survived attempts at sabotage, lost one operative in the field who'd died protecting crucial intelligence. The cost was real and constant. But so was the impact. Every conspiracy exposed, every threat neutralized, every life saved by their work. 2 years after that first state dinner, the Queen summoned them again. This time, the audience included a presentation, formal recognition for their service, medals that few would ever see, but that represented official acknowledgement of what they'd accomplished. "You have exceeded every expectation," the Queen said as she presented the honors. "The intelligence division you have built is now considered essential to England's security. Your work has prevented catastrophes that our citizens will never know were threatening them. And you have proven, beyond any doubt, that women's contributions to the realm extend far beyond what narrow minds imagined possible." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Eliza said, accepting the medal with hands that no longer trembled in royal presence. "Though the credit belongs to every woman who's joined this work, every agent who's risked everything to gather intelligence, every person who's believed that service to country matters more than society's limitations." Spoken like a true leader, the Queen smiled. "We understand congratulations are in order for another matter as well?" Eliza's hand moved unconsciously to her still flat stomach. Only Adrian, Caroline, and the Queen's personal physician knew about the pregnancy. It was too early to announce publicly, too vulnerable to reveal when enemies still circled. But the Queen had been informed because it raised questions about Eliza's continued active service. "Yes, Your Majesty. Though I assure you it won't interfere with my duties. We're not asking you to step back, Duchess. We're asking how we can support you continuing the work while also preparing for motherhood. The two need not be mutually exclusive. The Queen's expression turned knowing. After all, we have managed to rule an empire while raising 9 children. Surely the Duchess of Blackthorne can manage intelligence work and 1 infant. The support, the assumption that Eliza would continue rather than retire, meant everything. She felt Adrian's hand find hers, his grip tight with emotion he still struggled to voice. "Thank you," Eliza said quietly. "That means more than you know." "Oh, we know." The Queen stood, signaling the audience's end. "Now go, continue your extraordinary work. Raise your child to understand service and courage, and know that you have changed England in ways that will echo for generations." The carriage ride home was quiet, both of them processing the Queen's words. Finally, Adrian spoke. "Are you happy? Truly happy?" Eliza considered the question seriously. She thought about the woman she'd been, powerless, angry, treated as property to be traded. Then she thought about who she'd become, armed, trained, leading an intelligence division that was changing what was possible for women across England. "I'm terrified most of the time," she said honestly. "Terrified of making mistakes that cost lives. Terrified of failing the women who've trusted me to lead them. Terrified that our child will grow up in a world where our enemies succeed in their plots." "That's not an answer to whether you're happy." "I'm getting there." Eliza turned to look at him. "But yes, despite the terror, despite the danger, despite the constant pressure, I'm happy. I'm doing work that matters with a partner I love and building something that will outlast us both. That's more than the woman forced into marriage 4 years ago ever dreamed possible." 4 years, Adrian marveled. "It feels like both longer and shorter than that. Because we've lived about 10 lifetimes worth of intensity in that time." "Fair point." Adrian pulled her close. "And now we're adding a child to this chaos." "Are you afraid?" "Absolutely terrified. I'm about to be responsible for a tiny human while also trying to prevent national catastrophes. What could possibly go wrong?" Eliza laughed. "Everything, but we'll figure it out together." "Together," Adrian agreed, "like we figured out everything else." 6 months later, Elizabeth Adelaide Blackthorne was born, healthy, loud, and already showing signs of her mother's stubborn determination. Eliza took 3 weeks away from active operations, then returned with the baby in a cradle positioned in the underground office, Caroline volunteering as the world's most overqualified nursemaid when Eliza needed to be in the field. Society was scandalized. The Duchess of Blackthorne working while raising an infant, unseemly, improper, setting a terrible precedent. The Queen sent a massive bouquet of flowers and a note that simply read, "Well done, carry on." So they did. 5 years after that first desperate carriage ride to Blackthorne Manor, Eliza stood in the same drawing room where she'd once dined with Adrian and Caroline, fury and fear warring in her chest. Now the room held a different kind of gathering, women from across England, recruited to the intelligence division, meeting to coordinate operations across multiple fronts. Lady Catherine was there, having formalized her role as information broker and proven invaluable. Caroline led the Europe desk now, her language skills and social connections making her perfect for continental operations. A dozen other women, each one brilliant and brave, filled the space with quiet competence. And at the head of the table sat Eliza, the woman who'd started as a purchase bride and had become something unprecedented. "All right," she said, calling the meeting to order. "We have 3 active operations running simultaneously. Catherine, what's the status of the Portsmouth situation?" As the briefing unfolded, as strategies were discussed and agents assigned, Eliza felt Adrian's presence at the back of the room. He attended these meetings as a participant now, not the leader. That shift had been gradual, his recognition that Eliza had not just matched his expertise, but surpassed it in certain areas. His ego had struggled with the transition at first, but love and respect had won out over pride. After the meeting concluded and the others had left, he moved to stand beside her at the window overlooking the gardens where their daughter played with her nursemaid. "She's going to grow up thinking all mothers run intelligence networks," Adrian observed. "Is that a problem?" "No, just an observation. He slipped his arm around her waist. Though we should probably prepare for some interesting parent-teacher conversations when she starts formal education. My mother prevents national catastrophes for a living does make "what do your parents do?" a complicated question. We'll manage. We always do. Eliza leaned into him, watching their daughter laugh as she chased butterflies through the garden. Such ordinary joy against the backdrop of their extraordinary lives. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "That first decision to intervene in my father's debts? To buy yourself a bride who turned out to be far more complicated than you bargained for?" "Every day," Adrian said, then smiled at her shocked expression. "I regret that I didn't see your potential sooner, that I approached it as a transaction instead of recognizing what you could become, that I wasted time treating you as a strategic asset instead of a partner." He turned her to face him. "But do I regret choosing you? Never. Not once. You've made me better at everything, the work, relationships, being human. You've changed England's future, and you've given me a life I didn't know I needed." That's the most romantic thing you've ever said, and you still made it sound like an intelligence assessment. "Some habits die hard," Adrian kissed her forehead, "but the sentiment is real. I love you, Eliza Blackthorne, the woman who refused to bow, the Duchess who fought back, my partner in every way that matters. I love you too, even though you're still terrible at emotions. I'm getting better. You really are." They stood together in the window watching their daughter play, their hands intertwined. Behind them, in the underground office, maps tracked operations that would save lives. In London, agents they'd trained gathered intelligence that would prevent catastrophes. Across England, women found purpose and power they'd been told was impossible. The bride who'd arrived at Blackthorne Manor in fury and fear had become the Duchess who'd changed everything, not through submission or silence or accepting the role society demanded, but through courage, intelligence, and the absolute refusal to be anything less than extraordinary. The legend of the Cold Duke had transformed too. Adrian Blackthorne was still feared by enemies, but no longer alone, no longer isolated in his dangerous work. Beside him stood Eliza, the only woman who'd ever conquered the Duke of Shadows, not through force or manipulation, but through becoming his equal in every possible way. Together, they'd built something unprecedented, a partnership forged in shadows that had brought light to England's darkest threats, a marriage that had started as transaction and had become transformation. And as the sun set over Blackthorne Manor, painting the moors in shades of gold and crimson, Eliza looked out at the land that had once felt like a prison and now felt like home. She'd come here as a sacrifice, traded to settle debts. She would stay as a legend in her own right, the woman who proved that even in England's most dangerous shadows, the brightest lights could emerge, and that sometimes the greatest strength came from refusing to accept the limitations others tried to impose, from choosing courage over comfort, from becoming not what the world expected, but what the world desperately needed. The Duchess who refused to bow had become the woman who changed everything, and her story was far from finished.